everyone. There we go. We've got limited time together today. We've got a tight agenda. So we want everyone to, we're going to ask that everybody please keep your answers short or your questions short and concise. If you haven't already, please put your name in the chat with where you are located and your role. The December meeting minutes, I know, were sent out in email. Yeah, so we'll just wait for everybody to put their info in there. And then if we want to, are you able to, maybe in a minute, we'll put the meeting minutes up on the screen as well. That would be terrific. But they are in the chat. You can click on that and take a look and see, refresh what we went over last time. Are you guys able to put the meeting minutes up? I know the new training site had a delay, and I think the minutes might have addressed when we should be expecting that.
That will be found in the agency updates doc, I believe, Julie.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, and it looks like we had a discussion about the CPS or licensing division investigations, which we will be going over more today, doing feedback on a draft FAQ. So that's a positive update. I also want to mention we over the back, we slated one from the federal agency here today to answer questions and address things that came up last time. Or I should say on the webinar that was recently held. I'm sorry, I'm not sure where my co-chair is, so I'm just kind of winging it right now. If you guys have any questions from the minutes, go ahead and put those in the chat. Otherwise, I think we're gonna scroll till we're done with this, and then we can move on to the agency updates. Oh yeah, the community cafes, those are, I hope we hear more about that soon. Those are really great. We had a lot of discussion about background checks. This is just gonna keep coming up again and again.
Julie, this is Sandy Nelson.
Hi, Sandy.
Good morning, everybody. I was going to type my question, but it's going to end up being very long, and it has to do with the background checks. And I just wanted, because I wasn't at the last meeting, I just wanted a little bit of clarification about this suitability assessment and the meetings, because I'd never heard about those before with a candidate and DCYF. So can you kind of
Oh,
explain
well,
a little
maybe,
more what I talked about?
yeah, I think Matt's probably already on here. Maybe somebody can answer that in the chat. The suitability thing has been something that's been going on for a long time. It's just, not everybody gets stalled on that. Does somebody from the agency want to address that?
So I guess my question was directly, if a potential employee has a red flag, are they always contacted by the background check unit for a discussion? Because I've never heard that before. That's why I was asking.
You mean like every time they renew their check?
No, the first time they come through and there's a red flag.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
maybe we can put a pin in that question until we get to the background check part, and we'll make sure to get to that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make a note of that. Okay, we've got the agency update doc.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got updates about the cost of care. Okay, so they're wanting people to do the survey. Is that Jessica or Aaron, that link? Is that something you can drop in the chat for us? It says the survey will remain open through February, and providers will receive a $100 Amazon gift card for participating. Oh, yeah, that's great. I was just hoping that the link could be put in the chat so folks can click on it. Thanks for making that big again. Okay, and then we've got the early childhood equity grant application available soon. You guys should have gotten an email about that. Otherwise, there is a link in there. It'd be great if these links were compiled and dropped in the chat. But I believe it was also sent out on the email if you are on the committee. If you're not on the committee, this committee, you can drop your email in the chat and ask to be put on the email list, even if you're not on the committee. Then you'll get all the documents. Complex needs training available. I'm kind of curious, maybe Jamie can put a note in the chat because I feel like her staff went through something and with that and didn't get, there was some payment issue there. I'm hoping that was resolved.
No, but apparently it's supposed to come soon, but no, not yet. So hopefully, yeah, it's been about almost a year. So a lot of the people that were with us aren't here anymore, but we'll see. We'll see if some of us get it pretty soon.
Thanks. Yeah, it's come up a few times. I can't believe it's already been a year. Wow. So we've got some language updates. We've got update about the Tribal Early Learning Fund. Webinar, childcare business supports and resources. On February 20th in English. Wednesday is in Spanish and Saturday Somali. January is National Radon Action Month. Okay. Okay, I think we're gonna move on. Thanks so much. So we're gonna start off our meeting today with updates about the DCYF temporary licensing subcommittee recommendation response. And that means the agency has been writing a memo to address all of the recommendations. And the draft isn't ready yet, is my understanding, but they're gonna go over that today. So we've got DCYF's Senior Child Care Administrator Travis Hansen, we all know, Director of Early Care and Education, Hunter Chaba, hope I've said that right, and Assistant Secretary of Licensing, Ruben Reeves, to present the formal response about the TLS. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Julie. Good morning, everyone. Nicole, are you going to be talking?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, we didn't get
Okay.
that. Our apologies, Julie and team.
So good morning, everyone. Ruben Reeves, and I'm the Assistant Secretary of Licensing Division, and just want to provide just an update today. Like Julie said, on the TLS recommendations. As you know, we've been working on these for several months, maybe even years now, and we're close to an end. And so just want to thank everyone from this committee and ELAC for participating in this. And a lot of great things came out of this, guys, and a lot of things that we were able to accomplish. And there are some things that we can do now and some things that we will be doing in the future. So we want to just kind of celebrate that today and provide just a brief kind of update. Like Julie said, we are still finalizing the recommendations and our responses. And that should be, we're hopefully going to be done in the next few weeks, and then we will send that out on our public-facing website as well, with the ELAC and also the Provider Support Subcommittee. So we want to put that on the website so everyone can see that as well. So just, we're gonna provide a few examples today of some of the recommendations and our responses, and a lot of our responses came from this group, right? So there shouldn't be any surprises, I hope, but this is an opportunity to ask some questions and with some of the items that we've listed today. So I am going to hand it off to Nicole and Travis. Travis is going to be talking about recommendations from the licensing division, and then Nicole will address the ones from early learning. And again, these are just a few that we have selected through the TLS recommendations. So, please.
Great. Good morning. Travis Hansen, Senior Child Care Administrator. Thanks for having me. This is kind of neat because we get to talk about some of the stuff that we have accomplished here, right? So one of the big areas of asks was language, right? Language access, that kind of stuff. We hear you loud and clearly. We're making a commitment to improve our language access for providers. Currently, we're hiring multi-language licensors when we can in certain areas of the state to address some of those needs. We've made changes to some documents where folks can ask for some things translated and that kind of thing. So we're constantly trying to improve that. Another area of accomplishment is scheduling quarterly meetings with the licensing division, as well as at the local level. So Ruben and Nicole are completely in support of this, 100%, and we're working through trying to get those meetings scheduled. What we really want to do is we want to get out there in front of all of you and have some conversations, but we also want the local staff to as well. The local supervisor, as well as even licensors and the area administrator. So that communication is much better between local folks. So we are definitely committed to that and look forward to getting out and talking with folks and having those meetings. So if we can go to the next slide, please.
Good morning, Nicole Rose, Assistant Secretary of Early Learning, and happy to be here with you all. And just want to reiterate the work that has gone into this, the conversations that have happened with you all, and what you're seeing as we're going through this is us trying to organize sort of what we've accomplished, where we maybe still have some work to do, but really taking the responses that we've shared with you all before and have worked with you all on to get them organized in a bit of a different way. And so some of the other things that we see as an accomplishment in some of the recommendations that came forward in the tracker are really focused on feedback and trying to really work on what are the feedback loops? How do we take what we're hearing at ELAC or provider supports in other places and building those into the work that we're doing and really taking more of a human-centered design approach to our policy changes. And so you see that in us bringing decision packages here to have conversations about that as we're developing them, as we're working with our early educator design team around our cost of quality care model, and trying to really lean into that with some of our grant work as well. We've certainly heard that it's a good opportunity to come back and sort of check in and see what we might be able to adjust. Another thing that we have long heard around early achievers and our quality work is making sure that we're using an equity lens as we look at the early achievers requirements. And that's something that that team had really been dedicated to. And during the last several years, took some intentional time with providers, coaches, and others, really using our racial equity and social justice framework to look at that quality cycle and to really use that racial equity lens. And so you see that reflected in the revisions and providers having a little bit more control in their journey around sort of how they're showing us the way that they meet quality, and in the use of some of the tools that we're using now, no longer using the ERS in class. So if we can go to the next slide.
So talking about some commitments. So one of the recommendations was for licensors after their visits to have a way to give some feedback, a survey of how that went. At one point, we had this in place and we were doing a kind of an informal check-in. Right now, what we're in the process of is developing this so that it's in our Walk Compass system so that it will automatically send a message out to folks to gather some information. And then we plan on sharing that information once this is developed and in place. I know that this has been asked for a while now, and we saw some value of it through the COVID of getting some feedback on the virtual visits. So we think that we can do the same thing here. So Nicole, I think the next one's yours.
Yeah, I think the next couple of these, as we look at them, we're really trying to think about how we're really building out the capacity of others to support new providers who are coming into the system. And so you see that through our work with Imagine, with our coaches and others. And I know we are looking at some of this through our preschool development grant. The last one on here is really around the regions and how we're looking at regions as we think about subsidy. And I think that this has been an ongoing conversation for a few years, and the early educator design team was really able to sort of take a look at those regions. We are required to do that from the Fair Start for Kids Act, which was an amazing opportunity to be able to go in and say, do these regions make sense? And so they've made some recommendations related to that we will put forward in a decision package in January 2025 or for the 2025 session.
So just some clarification on some of the recommendations that took place. Guidebook came up. We offer it in a number of languages. There was a request to be able to get printed copies of it. The thing about it is that the guidebook is a living document. And so when we make updates in it, if you print it out, then you don't get those updates. what I would remind folks is you can also print sections of it out, right? So if you want a section, just print that section out versus having to print it out the entire copy. I know folks like to have that paper copy because they like to read through it and reference it very quickly and don't want to get online and get it. But because of the document that we make so many changes of it, it really does make sense not to print it out because it's a living document is what it is. Nicole, I think the next one is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. And I was just taking a look at Lois's comment in here as well. And Lois, I just want to acknowledge that I have seen that, and I'll take that as a follow-up and look more into that. As we kind of turn back to this clarification slides, I think just wanted to remind us all around quality improvement awards and what the intent of those were. And those were really meant to help support providers once they've completed the ratings process. And just a refresher that we do have needs-based grants available as providers are leading up to their rating process. And then tiered reimbursement is also really meant to be a support prior to rating. And as long as you're within those timelines, providers who are going through what we would consider kind of level 2 activities get a 2% tiered reimbursement. And so those are the avenues that we have to continue to support the ratings process. As we think about the Working Connections childcare subsidies and moving those payments to 100% of the market rate or truly funding the full cost of care, that's again work that we had done with our early educator design team. There are some recommendations that have come out of that, and we really are planning to use that to inform our decision packages for the 2025 session. And that is a movement from paying at the 85th percentile of the 2021 market rate survey to paying the true cost of care. And that's a decision that the legislature will need to make. I want to go to the next slide. So as Ruben said, we're really working on pulling all of this together into a memo. I just want to reiterate the responses that you're seeing are not new. We had shared these before in the tracker format. We just thought it would be helpful to really go through and think about what are the things that we've achieved, what are the things that we're committed to that maybe we haven't had an opportunity to do yet or need some legislative action. And then there are some places where we just wanted to provide clarification. But Ruben, I saw you come off mute and want to give you a chance to weigh in as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to say the same thing. Thanks, Nicole. And we want to finalize this document, guys, in a couple of weeks. So, and then we can also, Aaron, put it up on as an agenda for the next time we meet as well, in case anyone has any questions. But we want to provide that final document before we meet again. So, Travis, Susan had defined equity lens with child care check portal. Currently, you want to talk about that, Trav?
The child care check portal.
Mm-hmm.
Susan, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure, happy to. You know, it's really encouraging to hear that you're using the equity lens. It'd be great to hear the ways in which you're actually approaching this from an anti-racism perspective. But from an equity standpoint, when you go to the Child Care Check portal, and you'll see things like the compliance reports that show just the licensor side of the story, and not the circumstances which perhaps that infraction came. So if it's an intent to be a tool for families, when you only show one side of the story about how crappy we are because of the infractions, that's not the true story, because the true story is there is multitudes of high quality, wonderful programs out there, but the Child Care Check portal doesn't necessarily reflect that. And so I would like to see a shift from a punitive nature and make it one where it's actually a helpful tool to families, because families don't need to be scared out of choosing a provider. They need to be encouraged. And that's a problem that I would like to see addressed with equity lens, anti-racist policy, all kinds of things. But there's so much work that needs to be done in that regard with DCYF rules and regulations related to childcare. That's an important step, because there's also a survey going around asking, how do we, tell families about the mixed delivery childcare system, and asking for feedback. And this is one avenue by which we could actually encourage participation in childcare by not showing only one side of the story. So sorry, that was a long-winded.
No. I actually, I'm glad you clarified that. Here's the thing about childcare check. First off, I don't think parents use it as much as they should, right? And I think, and that's the idea of the tool, is what it was, but it's also a requirement from the feds, right? So it's one of our CCDF requirements that we post certain things, and for a certain amount of time, right? It's why things come off of that, and it's not your whole licensing record, it's a snapshot in time, right? And so I agree with you. I think that it's very, very punitive in the sense that it only shows the negative and doesn't show the positive side, because you could have one bad visit and the 3 visits prior to that were amazing, right? And that could have been just a bad day. So it's a snapshot in time. So I think we can do a better job of explaining that to parents. I think we can also do a better job of getting parents to use childcare check, right? I don't think that they use it. I think what happens is providers tend to get on there and look at it, but I rarely have a conversation with a parent that says, hey, I have a complaint about a center and I use childcare check to find that facility or whatever.
But Travis, I don't think the feds say only show the negative
No,
side.
no. That's
So I often hear that it's a federal requirement. So that's not, so what I just want to make sure is I don't want to, it's easy to fall back on that. But the truth of the matter is, it's also easy to have a different frame and look at the positive and not just the negative. And I don't know if that's a cultural thing at DCYF, but certainly in my world, we're always looking for the positive and support people when there needs to be change. And that's the shift that I'm not see happening at DCYF in licensing. So that's my 2 cents worth, or whatever it's worth.
I definitely think we can improve it, right? We just had an audit with the feds, and they pointed out some things about childcare check. So there's going to be some opportunities to improve it. And I hear what you're saying. That it needs to tell the whole story, and all it does is tell a snapshot in time, is what it does. Okay.
I wanted to share that the fact that there's assumptions that parents don't go in there to see, I feel is something that shouldn't be, is not the climate that it should be, because I know I encourage parents to go in. And I'm sure a lot of educators do. However, I do find it necessary to see both ends, because, for instance, I have my licensor came and looked at a bag in the closet, and I did everything that was inside the WAG. I did the extra steps. I've tagged Travis into my emails, but I haven't heard back yet. But I feel it's super sensitive to, my feedback from the supervisor is what in the report, my licensor wrote down that I said it was okay. And this licensor, it seems like it's a trend that is going on with educators here in Tri-Cities. But I followed through to do everything, and it doesn't matter what, the licensor is always right and the supervisor is always backing up. There's been lies, and then I get basically shunned down, like, my license, why are you attacking my licensor? I'm not attacking, I'm defending myself. And it's a very horrible climate to be in. And I feel that it's important for us to be able to have our say in those reports and take it serious for the ones that are making policy changes. Because as an educator, it's really heartbreaking to see that, oh, well, you left a bag at a child's reach where they can suffocate when you don't even have my oldest was a 7, and I'm being told was because you could have had a 13-year-old. And it's happening a lot. And I think it's important that we point this out here, because if we're trying to make changes, it is important for us to have our what we're going through on those reports when they're coming out. Because to me, it seems like we're always going to be wrong no matter what, because the licensors, supervisors always going to have their back. And we're not, or I'm not being, I'm not lying. I have no reason to lie that I did not say that, and it's documented. So now I have to go and get the reports from Olympia. And I don't think we need or have the time to be doing those things. And that's where a lot of us, where I've heard, there's a lot of anxiety going on because of licensors. And if you were able to push for us to have our end in there, then it would alleviate a lot of we're doing something wrong and being judged over that, versus we're appealing, this is a decision, this is what I'm saying. And for us also to be able to have an ability to be when they're doing the reviews, not that they do a review, they see it, they come up with a decision and we have no say. It's like we're being tried in court without giving any of our, what really went on.
I think that was an important point. I think if you're going to be using words like suffocating and putting it in childcare check, there should be a space for a provider response saying that, well, there was a garbage bag sitting nearby. It is hard with the reports being on the licensors' computers to have a response anymore. So did Travis or anybody else want to respond to that?
Yeah, I would just remind folks that there is a supervisor review process, right? So one thing that we did with that review process is actually at the second level, we took it out of the supervisor and the region level so that it's looked at a statewide level. So it's not just staying in-house at one supervisor level, because we've heard that folks say that, well, it doesn't matter because the supervisor is going to support the licensor. I don't believe that's the case. I think that there are rare situations that feeling is given off, but we've made the process as transparent as possible to get the review out of the local region office so that folks can take a look at it from a statewide, and we can learn and give feedback to licensors and make it as much as a transparent process as possible, as well as really learning from if we are over regulating in situations that we can tell our licensors, no, this is the way that you're supposed to do it. And that's when it does come off the record, right? Those ones don't show up on childcare check.
So who do we contact? Because I went all the way to the supervisor in Spokane.
Yep.
And she said she was there and she was present and she agreed because it was up to age, if I had a 13-year-old here, it was a choking hazard. It was in a closet. I had two, it was just like a bag with Christmas things, little stuff that was up high, 5'6" around there. I had little stuff before anybody could even get there. And I only had one that usually come. And they said that was it. That was a fine. She said, I think it's Christine or something. She said it can't go any further than that. That's when I heard I could go to Travis, and then I emailed, and then my licensor said Travis has nothing to do with this, and you don't need to CC him. So I don't know if I was right or wrong because I haven't had a reply, but the fact of the matter is that I'm at the point where I want to get an attorney because I've tried to change my licensor already 3 times because she says something verbally, but then when I reply, then it's like I'm attacking her because she didn't say it. I've tried to change my licensor 3 times and it's not right. it's not right to feel uncomfortable at being stuck in a situation like that. Now coming to the point where Marian Cruz is saying, I don't know what you're,
Julie, I can.
I could talk to you later.
Yeah, I think this is an
It's an important,
individual
yeah.
scenario.
But it's not just happening to me, and this is why I'm sharing it. It is this licensee I have, licensor I have, it's not just happening to me. It is actually like a trend, and there are Spanish educators wanting to do something about it, and they are scared, but there's no reason to be working scared. Yeah, but we can talk further.
It's a fair point. I mean, have the conversation with Travis, you know, outside of the committee, but it is a fair point to say that this is not an isolated incident. Other providers are experiencing similar things, and it needs to be noted. So.
But Julie, I just wanted, I hear that, but we also need specific like examples, and we also need to provide a safe environment for providers to come to area administrators or Travis and have that conversation, right? With no fear of retaliation and nothing. I mean, you guys heard me say this before. When I hear that, I kind of cringe, right? So every provider should have the opportunity to go up the chain and have a conversation. And we may not agree at the end, but at least they will be heard and a conversation will be held. So, but it's important to have these examples, right? So when you're running with saying there's like, this is bigger than me, or issues like, well, we need to know about that, right? We need specific examples that we can address.
Right. I will say that going up the chain and doing the supervisory review is not something that everybody knows how to navigate. And maybe that's something that we should have a topic for this group. I think that having the post, you know, after a licensing visit, having a survey, I think that would be very helpful if that gets going, and if that data is analyzed and people can anonymously, should they choose to be anonymous, explain their, you know, experience with their licensor and what happened. But I also think that this is one of those areas where technology has put a little bit of a barrier for providers, because when licensors come and they do their visits, they're on their technology. I think it's a tablet now or a laptop, I don't know. And it used to be that they would fill out the form on paper in front of you. You could read it, you'd write your response. And now when a licensor comes, a lot of times you don't even see what they're going to be putting in there until it's dropped on child care check. And it's like, well, where was the opportunity for the provider response? So, you know, I get that technology is helpful in that scenario for the licensors, but it's a detriment to the providers, because we don't have that ability to put in a response or to even see it before it gets posted necessarily. So that's something that I'd like to see addressed.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing you just shared, because I've had to literally, I have like tons of emails I'm having to write. And I know a lot of my educators here in the community. In fact, this week there was Sandra Sanchez provided a meeting, like a group meeting for questions and answers on grants or supportive things. A lot of them were scared to share information because they've had retaliation when they've shared it with their licensor supervisor, and their challenge is the language and the technology. And I'm going through so much just with that, and I feel I'm very comfortable with it, but others are not, and they don't know where to start. They don't know that they could ask for their files through Olympia because it's public records. And I feel due to that, one example, my licensor coming out and saying something or over the phone and then saying I'm lying is a very toxic relationship to have with anybody, because then when we say something, we're getting answers like, well, why are you always attacking my licensor? I'm not attacking. So those are intimidations tactics. So I didn't even write back yesterday because I was asking for a license increase. And they kept telling me I don't. I have 25 years experience in early learning, whether it's a TA or up to a supervisor. And she said that I didn't because Merit told her I don't have qualifications. So when I wrote that back in the email, Mary Cruz says we don't call Merit. but I've been approached with my licensor telling me they do. So I kept fighting it, like, because I feel it's my right. And I know a lot of providers here, due to technology, are unable to do it. And I don't think that we should be going through anything like that.
Yeah, I think that this really highlights that we need to bring the topic of monitoring visits and what happens during, after, and the supervisory review process to this committee. Just for a discussion and for some walkthroughs on how to go up the chain and do a supervisory review. But I'd also love to see some more transparency in these visits, Travis.
I would-
And it's just technology being a barrier, kind
Here's
of.
the thing, I would love to come and explain our processes, right?
Great.
So that
Okay.
you guys could use them.
Okay, good.
They are extremely transparent. It's feedback from all of, it was folks that were formerly on this group who gave the feedback for the soup review process, right? They're the ones that went through it. There's tons of, we can share it all to you. It was just other providers that went through the process to develop it, is what it is.
Thank you. That's great to know. We would love to have you back to talk about that. I don't want to eat the rest of the time. I know that I wanted to make sure that you guys got through everything that you wanted to about the TLS. And I'm wondering when and there's hands up. I'm wondering when that memo is going to be finalized for all of us to see. So can we just do that real quick, and then I'm going to go to Lois.
The
We know when the
TLS memo, Julie, is that what your question was?
Yeah, when is the DCYF response going to be final?
Yep, so we have a meeting next week to look at the final touches on that. And so I would hope in the next couple of weeks or so. Ruben, does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, Julie, my Taylor's taking the lead on this too, and so we're really hoping to have a final sometime in March, Julie.
Okay, and when you say final, it's not final. It doesn't mean the work's final, right? It's just.
Yes,
okay.
good point, Julie. Yeah.
All right, Lois, I see your hand up.
Yep, thank you, Julie. I put something in chat, but realizing that some folk are just on the phone, so I just wanted to make sure that is seen. First, the audit that you said you just went through, Travis or Ruben, forgive me, I can't remember who mentioned it. Oh, and also good morning, guys. I wanted to know if that's something that can be made available, if not to this group at a minimum ELAC, because I think that also goes with transparency. I also want to point out, that thing about a snapshot in time, it is that for sure. But we also know that a snapshot in time can definitely impact a business much longer. Whether it's a restaurant, a hospital, doctor's office, whatever the case may be, the internet has a long memory. And so it can really negatively impact a business because, whether it's a family home or a center, it's a business. And it can negatively impact it in the long term. So I just wanted to find out as well, just that's a statement. My question is, how long must things be kept in child care check? And who is responsible for ensuring that older infractions drop off over a set period of time? Because I'd imagine, I know we have to keep records for a certain amount of time, and then after that we can shred them. I would think the same should be true of things posted in child care check, but not really sure what the federal requirement is for that.
Lois, it's 3 years. And it automatically comes off, right? So it rotates through. So anything over 3 years comes off. If for some reason you look at yours and that's not accurate, let us know. We'll fix it. Sometimes it's a glitch with a date in the system is what it is.
Okay, Jamie?
I think the important thing to remember here is, there's a lot of system, improvements and things we'd like to see, but I think the overarching theme that I see here on a lot of these issues that we talk about is just feeling like there isn't a partnership between licensors and providers, and it has gotten, unfortunately, and I'll say this again because I've said it before, but in 2019, when the new WACs came out, it was all about partnership and assistance and building something together, and technical assistance from the licensors. And the licensor I had at the time was super like, we get to, give you advice, and it's twisted into this, okay, you got technical assistance this time, next time it's a write-up. It's like it's created this punitive thing with the technical assistance. And so, and I know that COVID and staff turnover, and I really sympathize with you guys, because it's a tough thing to try and manage all this. But I've been in this field a long time, and I feel like I am, like one of the previous people said, the anxiety level that they're just picking every little tiny thing is real. And I don't know if they fully understand that, or I'm just not sure, but it is very punitive. It's more punitive than it was 10 years ago. And so I don't know how that happened, because I don't feel like that was originally the intent, but that is the direction that it's going. And I think that's why you're getting so much kickback from providers on this stuff, is because it feels very punitive. I don't feel that same way from early achievers. I only feel that from licensing. And so that is what bothers me, I think. And I had my licensor retired a couple of years ago. She was my licensor my whole career, which was awesome, right? We had a great partnership, and I don't feel that from the new providers. And that worries me for the field, because I feel like it's going to push people out. That's all I have to say.
So Jamie, I know, Julie, I know when you move on, but I don't like hearing this, and neither does Travis, right? That's not the culture we want to create. I do not, when I hear like it's been more punitive than 10 years, that's something that we need to change, right? And so we are committed to that. That's not what Travis and I want to hear, and that's not the culture that we want to create in our partnership with our childcare providers and our team, right? So I'm hoping these conversations, will happen in regional meetings. I think that will help. Let's please bring it up in regional meetings, and that way our supervisors and our area administrators will hear that, right? The people that work with you on a daily basis. So let's continue this conversation. Let's continue to try to improve, right? And we need to hear it as well.
Yeah, I want to go back
But Jamie,
to.
it could be just. Sorry, Julie. Sorry. You mentioned it before.
Excuse me, before we continue, can I speak for 5 minutes?
Hold on a minute, Gloria. Ruben, you were saying something, I think, in response to Jamie. And then also I want to go back to, Lois had asked about the audit and if we can receive a copy, or at least ELAC. Ruben, did you want to finish your thought there?
Yeah, just real quick. I just going kind of Jamie's, and she said this before. I mean, we have some turnover of staff, right? And so there are some new licensors to the workforce, and so we need to continue to do that training and coaching with our staff to ensure that we are offering that technical assistance, and we're not out to get providers, right? We are a regulatory body, right? We do have rules that we have to do, and by the feds, but you could do it, and that delivery and that approach could look different, right? So thank you for bringing it up, Jamie.
Audit question?
Julie, I think it's posted on Child Care Check. You can look on it on there.
The audit that DCYF went through?
Yeah, that's a joke though.
No,
So is that-
I'll take that one, Travis and Ruben.
Yes.
So it's our Child Care Development Fund audit, and was just checking with Matt Judge, and that's not typically something that we have published, and I'm checking in around what if anything we could do there. The other thing I just want this group to know is that it takes the Office of Childcare a bit of time to actually go through, review everything. I know the team did a great job in meeting with our federal partners on site last week, but we also have follow-ups that we are still doing. So it's going to be a bit of time before we get that formal monitoring report for them. So we'll also take it as a follow-up about what, if anything, we might be able to publish in the future.
Okay, great. I just want to reach out to Aaron or Jessica. Do we have translator services today? We normally, well, it's a new thing for us, but we were expecting that. Do we have that?
Yes, Rebecca and Austin are here and are translating and are helping in the chat.
Good, great, thank you. Okay, there was a question in the chat. There's a couple of questions in the chat. All right, so Travis, maybe you can address the checklist question. First time forgiveness items are not supposed to be shared on childcare check. Oh, is that one that you can look at?
Yeah. So
Okay.
first time forgiveness, it's low risk violations do not show up on childcare check. That's the whole purpose of first time forgiveness, is that they will not show up on childcare check. We're just giving technical assistance. Now, if the next time we come out, then it's a repeat, then it does show up.
So Travis, that's actually not accurate. If I can just interject, it does not show up on the monitoring, on the visit, on the licensing report, but it does. But the checklist is also on there, and in the checklist, it does have the items listed. Therefore, it is on childcare check.
Yeah, but it doesn't show up on the IR, right? It's not. It doesn't show up as an out of compliance.
It says. So when you go through there on the checklist, it shows up as being an item that was not compliant. So maybe DCYF understands that that's the policy, but parents that have access to this do not understand it. And more importantly, right now is insurance companies that are now looking at those things to rate you for insurance are seeing those things that are first time forgiveness items. It does say non-compliance because the whole checklist is on childcare check.
So is that something you can look into, Travis? And
yeah,
then
I can look into it. The purpose of it is that it's not an item that is out of compliance. That's why it doesn't transfer over to the compliance agreement that then you fill out, right? So we've done this for years with the checklist, even going back to when Julie's talking about using paper checklists, which I was around for that. That's how I started doing it, right? And so you would check you would say non-compliance, or you'd say discussed, or we had another box, or just NA, right? So we were still making checks there, but only the items that were out of compliance and would transfer over to the compliance. It's the same thing. It's just a system that is tracking it now, and everybody can see the checklist online is what it is.
Okay, so there's a question from Gloria in the chat about increasing capacity.
I think that's an individual thing, and
Okay.
they probably need to follow up with their local licensing is what they need to do. The local office supervisor, AA.
Okay, so did you guys all see there's a link in the chat to the Menti so that you guys can comment, ask additional questions or whatever on this topic, the topic being TLS. The presentation, but also the discussion, the parts that maybe you still want to talk about or still have questions about, put it in the Menti and we can address some of that at maybe our next meeting, hopefully. Okay, Gloria, I'm sorry, Gloria, you had tried to say something and we were kind of in the middle of.
Yes, I want to follow in.
We just have a couple minutes. Can you be really quick? Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. I want to follow it about what Miss Veronica said and what Miss Jacqueline brought in the chat about the monitoring visits and about all that, the situation with the licensors, and it's getting a little worse. Before was better. Now they go back to the being rude, being punished, and don't respect providers. I've been having a phone calls from providers that sometimes they feel intimidated by the licensors and those don't feel respected. I remember years ago, we have same situations and we report this to our union, and our union had a meeting with DCYF and was a little change on licensors. But now I think they's past the moment and they's back again with that kind of attitude. We requested in that time and start the licensor be punished or be rude, they have to be more educational, more sensitive, and provide education and information to the providers, not to intimidate them, because that is the sensation the new provider is having. They feel intimidated by the licensors, and I think that's not be the main goal in here by DCYF. We don't want to be like really, really good friends, but at least good peers working for the same mission and feel respect each other and validate each other, but they have to have a little more, how I can say, human relations conversations and very respectful, a healthy communication, and provide the information they have to provide and be flexible. Because one provider say one thing, one licensor say one thing, the different licensors say different thing. And that's why providers get a lot of confusion. Also, I want to bring what I wrote in the chat about extended capacity. It's a challenge to request for extended capacity. And also I'm going to say by my own experience, because I want to live the experience.
Gloria, I'm just going to stop you for a second there. The capacity issue is not something we have time to address in the agenda, but who can Gloria email about that topic?
Yes, only I
Guys.
want to finish this sentence.
Okay.
Okay. I had everything done, and I feel it, provided we fill it up, the format is in the documents and format by DCYF. We submitted by email to the licensor, having everything done. We don't receive answers until we send another email requesting what is happening. We don't receive answers after third email. And later on, they say, but you need to go to the web provider and check that you need extended capacity. And we didn't know that information, like we had to do that second step after requesting answers. And then that is done and wait too long again for an answer and keep bothering with emails until finally almost 2 months to receive the answer. And yes, you have the extended capacity. It's a long process.
I have to stop you. We're going to go off the rails with our agenda time today, but what I'm hearing is she has emailed and she's not receiving a response. And so she's bringing it back to this committee, which it's not on the agenda, so we can't go into it. But if her emails are going unanswered, I understand the frustration of wanting to be heard somewhere. So
I'll follow up with her, Julie.
That would be fantastic. So the next topic, we're going to go to Katie. She's going to introduce. I gotta thank you guys for the previous topic, even though we did delve off into a few different directions. And the next topic's a big one. And if we need to have a little further discussion, there is a 15-minute break at 11:45 that we can stick around for. So Katie?
Yeah, good morning. Sorry I was late today. Starlink was not working in my area. Yeah, so the next topic, it's been on the agenda for the last few meetings, and it's about the licensing and CPS investigations and when they come on site. So DCYF has been working really hard to put together a frequently asked question document. So today we have Taylor Nussbaum, who is going to go through that document, take questions, and then we're going to break out into some groups so we can review it in small groups. So Taylor, you have the floor. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm probably a new face and a new name. So my name is Taylor Nussbaum. I am the QA CQI program manager in the licensing division. And I've been with DCYF since 2018, so when we were still Dell. So I have some history with the agency, so I'm happy to be working on projects like this to help provide documents for providers to better support you guys. So today we are going to review the facts documents. We gathered the questions from you guys and kind of separated them into two. So licensing, complaint, inspections, and licensing division LDCPS complaint investigations. So we divided the questions. There is some overlap between those two inspections and investigations. So some of the topics might be similar on the facts documents. But we really wanted to make sure that the questions specific to those processes were on there. So what we are asking today is for you to review the documents. We're going to split up into groups, give you some time to review it, and then give the opportunity to provide questions and feedback in a Menti. I believe it's going to be a Menti thing. But yeah, so essentially today we want to hear from you because we want to make sure that the content on these facts documents are what you need, right? So that's essentially what we're going to be doing today. So I'm not sure who's in charge of doing the breakout rooms, but I think we're going to
Here, I can hop in really quick, Taylor. There was a disclaimer I wanted to make. Jessica will get everybody put into the breakout rooms, but for participants who wish to be in the Spanish speaking breakout room, there's not an easy way for us to identify you guys. So if you could raise your hands, and that way Jessica will know who to put in the Spanish speaking breakout room. And then, yeah, it'll just take a couple minutes to get that sorted out, but we'll get going on that now.
Perfect. And the draft documents are in the chat for you. And I think once we get the Spanish speaking people into the correct group, we can go ahead and just go to those breakout groups.
Can we make sure that there's a DCYF person in each of the breakout rooms? I'm not sure that everybody is able to view the documents that were dropped in there. Some folks might be on via their phone.
Yeah, Julie will be able to pop into the breakout rooms if needed, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
And while we wait, were these sent out to the whole committee also?
Yes, these were included in the prep email.
Great, thank you.
And yeah, we're happy to pop in if needed, but I do encourage everyone to grab the document in the chat. And if you're able to, just download it so you can have it up on your screen. But if any assistance is needed there, we can definitely provide that. And thanks for bearing with us while we get these breakout rooms set up. That should
Ya
just
los
be
descargué, gracias. Yeah, thanks everybody. And I believe we're going to do 25 minutes. So they should be open now.
Okay, so I know there was some movement on the on the Jamboard. Yay. Do we have somebody from room 1 that wants to talk about some of the things that they found they want to discuss from the FAQs? Room 1. Oh, there's Katie. Oh. Nobody from room 1, huh? Okay. How about we go with anybody else? Anybody want to come and talk about something that their group found troubling or concerning or needs further discussion from the FAQs?
I think the thing that, oh, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I don't know what room I was in, so I'll just chime in for the group that I was with, that we did talk about some of the questions didn't really have an answer. Specifically, like they just said, more information will be available, or it was just the website. So it left for more questions rather than supporting what the purpose was, I think. So that was what we talked about mainly, was the questions that didn't really give us the answer we were looking for.
I have 2 big issues with this FAQ. I mean, there's a lot of little issues, but my 2 big issues are the one about cell phones, personal cell phones that our staff have. The question in the FAQ says, what are the rules about contacting childcare employees on their personal cell phones? And the rule wasn't really provided. It just points to an RCW about being a mandated reporter. These FAQs, I thought, were supposed to be written so that it supports providers' understanding of what is required versus what is requested. There's a big difference between required and requested. And I can tell you that if my staff were to get a call from a licensor or from anybody with DCYF, they would just hang up. Like, they're not required to speak with on their personal time, or when they're on the clock. I would freak out. I mean, honestly, they're not allowed to be on their cell phones when they're at work anyway. So this answer doesn't address the rule, and it doesn't address what a provider would say to their staff about it, really. It just tells us what DCYF wants to have happen, kind of. It kind of phrases it in a way that makes us feel like maybe it is required, but it's not. My other big problem is on both of the FAQs, so the licensing division and the CPS one. The question is, if an investigator requests a full contact list of enrolled families, even when an incident only involves specific children, do providers have to provide that information? And it does provide an RCW. I've been in this situation, and I've said, can I have the RCW that authorizes you to request that, to get my full contact list? Because I think it's terrible business practice. I think my families would not appreciate getting calls from CPS just to casually ask if they like the center or if they have any concerns. So I've asked for the RCW, I get it back, I look it up, and the only thing in there that I can find is shall have access to all relevant records of the child in possession of the mandated reporters and their employees. So I feel like there's an interpretation issue going on there when it comes to all relevant records, because I do not consider anything relevant outside of the child that was specifically involved. So that's my 2 big issues with the FAQ.
Julie, that was sort of the point you said it in a much more articulate way, was that the responses were very vague and left up to interpretation and didn't really resolve what the questions are. And then often you end up going down a rabbit hole when you're like, oh, it refers to this, and now I got to go find this to find another reference that you have to go find. And so if it's meant to be a useful tool, that's where we just kept having conversations around. It's very vague. It's up to interpretation. We're not really sure what we're supposed to get out of this.
In our
Right.
group, we discussed the fact that many of these things are self-reported by providers when we know about it, or there's incidents where a family has a child that's maybe fell on the playground or whatever, and then a week later takes them to the doctor, and we may not even know they went to the doctor. And then we get treated like, dirt because we didn't self-report. And those documents don't address any of that. Like, there should be something about, since self-reporting is such a big component of this, and it's not addressed at all in those documents.
I also think somebody else wrote this on the Jamboard too, but there is a frightening component to a CPS, founded, unfounded, when you're an individual in this field. So like as a teacher, and what could happen to you if the report is founded, it's a big deal. And teachers should know that. They don't have protection like they do in the school district. They don't have, they don't have some of the protection that they have in other arenas of education. And I think I was sharing that I have a friend that's gone through this process and had to appeal twice. And it was a long, mentally exhausting, difficult process. And the least we could do is provide a very transparent guide to what's going to happen in that situation, so that people know that that's a risk that they get into, because it was just a mistake in the situation that she was in. A child got out of the center didn't have any repercussions, but she did. And so did her co-teacher, and she wasn't allowed to work with children. She couldn't work with the elderly. She wasn't going to be able to foster. It was a big deal for her. And so I think teachers should know this. And I think that we have a right to ask for all the information so that we can make informed decisions and really educate our staff about what the processes are.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that I put this sticky note too of like, this is an FAQ for directors, but like there needs to be one for staff, like that are involved in these types of situations. I unfortunately have been through many of these like processes, and the staff get no information. Like they just get called into a room, they have to talk to somebody. Sometimes that person is a detective. Sometimes that person is like a licensor that just gives them a card and then just starts asking questions. And like multiple times been left with that person leaves and we'll have staff sobbing. Like, what's going on? Like, am I in trouble? Like, what's going to happen to me? And then we're left to try and explain the whole situation and describe to them like, oh no, like you are the subject of this, or no, you're just a witness of this, or oh, by the way, it's going to be 45 days. Oh, by the way, it's going to be probably at least 45 days. And like people ask questions, do I need to find another job? Like, can I still work like while this is going on? Like all of these things. And I don't ever feel like any of the people from CPS or licensing do a good job of like laying out like what people are really a part of, and they don't understand the stakes. Like, so I've either got people like freaking out completely or acting like it's a nothing, and they don't know, like what it is. And so the other suggestion is if there's any guidance on how to manage staff. 45 days is a really long time. And it's like, just act like nothing's happening unless you pull their background check. Like, is that the expectation? I've worked at places that put people on admin leave. We've had we've had 3-4 staff that have been in a single classroom on admin leave for 3 months, like waiting for this information. CPS does not give any communication at all, and then sends a letter to the teacher that you don't get a copy of, that then that they won't let you see. Then you're trying to chase down your licensor so your licensor can contact CPS. We've had times where the CPS investigation was done and we didn't even know. So I think just the communication between like these multiple levels is super important. And then like the teachers need to know what their rights are. If it was me, like especially as a male, like doing this work, and almost every single case that I've been involved in has involved an accusation against a male, I would not talk to anyone without a lawyer. Nobody. So I think if that's an option, then people need to know what their options are before they just start talking to these investigators.
I think we just need to make sure that I mean, of course, we want kids to be safe. That is not the issue, but we need to have our civil rights honored. We should be able to be treated as like innocent until proven guilty. You know, and I think Jared and the other points that are made are correct. We don't have anything to inform staff about what their rights are. And, you know, it does put providers in the position of regularly needing to consult legal counsel. Because there isn't clarity on the investigation side on what rights they're going to allow us to have versus what rights that should never be infringed upon.
Right. Thanks for that, both of you. Those were important points. And for me, it goes back to requested versus required and how it's approached. And I'm honestly a little surprised. It sounds like in Jared's experience that staff were contacted directly without looping in the director of the center. That's surprising to me, but I would say that for me, I would tell your staff just to hang up if they get a call on their personal cell phone and make sure that it goes through the, through the right, what we would consider the right channels, right? Calling the center, talking to the director, finding out what the issue is, figuring out a time when your staff are available for a conversation. So it's not interrupting their shift or their personal time. Okay, I see a hand up and I do not know how to say that. Nimao?
Sorry, yes. I just had an incident happen to me 2 months ago with the CPS worker. They came out to visit. By the way, I'm a family child care provider. A CPS worker came out to visit 2 kids in my care. They were talking to the kids, and one of the kids had mentioned that something happened to her at her previous daycare where she got burned or something. And I heard everything that was going on. And the child clearly said that this incident happened at so-and-so's daycare, which was the daycare prior to before I took them in. And the CPS was taking notes, and I was thinking that she was gonna go after the previous provider, but apparently she did not put the right information on her notes. So 2-3 days later, I got a call from the CPS licensing division CPS worker, and she wanted to investigate me for that incident that did not even occur in my daycare. And I was telling her, she said, I want to investigate this. There was a report saying that you had a child that was burned at your daycare. And I wanted to explain to her, no, that's not what it was. It's not me. And she just wouldn't listen. And she said, no, I'm going to come out. I'm not going to tell you who said it or who made the report or what the report was, but I have this report and I have to come out and basically investigate this. And I was telling her that you can't investigate me for something that did not even happen in my daycare, but she still wouldn't listen. And then I had to call the other CPS worker. And then I was like, well, you came out and the child clearly said it's not me. So why am I being investigated? And she said, well, just let him know. And I said, well, she's not listening. And I still had to, like, a whole day. It took my time to explain myself. No, it's not my daycare. It's the previous daycare. And the lady wouldn't listen at all. And then finally, around like at the end of the day, she called me and said, oh, well, I got the right information. I guess you're not the provider who had this incident or whatever. so we're just gonna go to the right provider. And there was no apology or nothing for her taking all my time. So incidents with CPS happens all the time, where you could easily get investigated for things that are not even either at your facility or that you're being wrongfully accused of.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. It sounds like that investigation didn't even need to occur on your premises, maybe in the child's home, since it was nothing to do with you as a provider. That's confusing. So I'm wondering what the next steps are for this document, because there are so many provider concerns, and we appreciate, you know, you coming here and showing us the draft document and taking the feedback. So what are the next steps to incorporate the feedback?
Yeah, so this is all great feedback, right? And these are draft documents, so obviously not final, and we do want to give you the information that you need as providers. So Erin is going to kindly gather all of the information off of these Jamboards and provide that to us so that we can take that back to the subject matter experts and really look at these more closely, try to revise some answers that may feel like non-answers. And then I do think that it would be worth bringing back another copy to see, maybe go through a little bit more closely each question, potentially, you know, really give some clarity and explanation to the content that's in the document. So I think that's going to be the next step. We're going to gather, you know, what you've provided, the feedback, and kind of revisit this and plan to bring it back. So we do have Melissa Sawyer here. She is a subject matter expert for LDCPS. So I do want to give her an opportunity to share any thoughts or perspectives after hearing that feedback. So I just want to, you know, let you know she's here.
So thank you, Taylor. I don't really have anything to add at this time. I was taking notes on what folks were saying, and I think Taylor has it correct that we're just going to regroup and look at some of these answers and see how we can add a little bit more clarity. I think that one of the things I'm hearing is some confusion of roles. This was made just for directors, and it sounds like maybe we need more than one created, one for staff, because that just might be necessary. Also information for subjects, which would be different than directors. So we'll just definitely take this back and take a look at it.
We appreciate that, Melissa. I think for us providers, when we do have CPS or licensing on site for a complaint, that we're left with nothing except a business card usually. So to have anything to give to our staff who were just told that they're possibly being accused of something, and for us as providers, that this is a great document. And as you can hear, there's still concerns, but just anything for us to be able to have in hand to answer some of the questions is absolutely appreciated.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you again, Ruben. Anything you want to add for these documents? I don't know if it's just me, Ruben, but I cannot hear you.
No, he's muted for some reason.
Sorry, is on double mute. We want to get this right? This is for information for directors and owners of childcare. So good feedback today. At the end of the day, Julie, you kind of mentioned yours. I mean, we may not agree on some of the interpretation of RCWs, right? I mean, I just want to be honest with you guys. CPS is, I mean, you guys heard my spiel on this, right? Not going away, right? We are by law required to investigate allegations of abuse and neglect in licensed childcare, and we can't control who gets, who calls an intake. You guys heard me say that before, right? I mean, anyone can call an intake, a parent or even one of your staff members can call and And if it screens in for allegations of abuse and neglect, then we have to investigate. However, we train our staff, and Melissa is the administrator. She's been doing this for about 20 plus years. We train our staff to be professional, respectful. We train our staff to not go in there and say, you did this, and I need to talk to you about this. We train our staff to say, these are allegations that I'd like to talk to you about, and then also inform the subject if they are the subject. No one likes to be investigated by CPS, guys. You guys don't, your staff don't, biological homes don't, you know. We have very, very few foundeds, and but we're there for a reason. But just like our licensors and just like our investigators, we need to do it professional, respectful, and make sure you have the information you need. So great information today. We'll work on it and bring it back to this group.
It looks like we might have one question. I think we have time. Lorena, I think that's how you say your name. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. Hi. I have a lot of stories involving CPS in licensors in childcare, in home licensed childcare providers, homes. But I want to ask, where is the limit, or how can we work things out, or is there anybody else that we can go to when we have issues with the licensor, CPS, and the police just throwing the like the hot potato to each other? Oh, it's not me. Go talk to somebody else. Oh, it wasn't me. It was the licensor. No, it's not me. It's the CPS. Oh, it wasn't me. It's we're waiting on the police report. And so and they just go on and on and on and on, throwing the rock at each other and not fixing anything. While all of this is happening, providers are not working because they just go in and shut them down. That didn't happen to me, thank God, but it just happened not long ago, and it was all over the news. And that's another thing, that it's hurting providers. It's hurting people, innocent people, with all of these things. And I don't know if there's anything wrong with me mentioning the CPS social worker. The last name is Cantu. She just goes in and shuts people down without investigation, without doing anything. She just goes in and you're close. So there should be like a limit to where they stand, to not just walk into people's businesses and shut them down for no reason, or just because they think something's going on, and let them suffer for months until they find like well, in none of these cases they found nothing. They just put on the news, not enough information found it. I think this is not acceptable for anybody. If it would have happened to me, I don't know, I would have gone crazy, because like I said, it was all over the news, it was all over social media. And for them to just walk into your house, into your private home, into your business, and walk all over you and shut you down and accuse you of something horrible like that, and then just all of a sudden, oh, it wasn't me, it was the licensor, and then the licensor, no, it wasn't me, it was her, and then throwing the rock at each other. So this is not okay, I don't think. In where does it stand? Where's the limit to that? What else can we do to protect ourselves so these things are not happening to us? Because we're not protected. We're more vulnerable than the kids, because anybody can just walk in and shut us down. They're not thinking about our income, that we're feeding our families with this type of work, that we're helping families to go to work. We just have to call them and tell them, oh, come and pick up your kids because we're just shut down for no reason. And then what are the parents going to do? Stop working? So it's just, I don't know. It's horrible. It's frustrating. And we need more information.
Thank you for sharing. For the sake of time, I am going to pass it back to the host. Jared, I see you have your hand raised, but I'm hoping you can put your question or comment in the Menti. So I will pass it off to you, Julie. Thank you.
Do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, I think these are all valid points. Again, this is just on the, sharing the document and not being able to, necessarily change the way that their investigations go, but just for the information for us and answering questions. So I think there's a lot to take back for that team. And we're so thankful that you guys were here, Taylor. Really, truly, I know this took a lot of work. So thank you so much for putting energy and time into this for us as providers.
Right, so guys, make sure that you use the Menti link. You can see on the screen that there's only been 3 comments dropped into the Menti so far. The link will probably stay open for a while, even after the meeting. So make your comments and use the Jamboard. It'll also stay open. Okay, so we're going to move on to the background check portion. During the presentation, please put your thoughts in the chat so that we make sure that we have time for everything. We've got DCYF's Federal Initiative and Collaboration Administrator, Matt Judge, who we all know, and Provider Supports Administrator Meryl Stride. We're so glad to have you both. And a representative from the Administration for Children and Families, the federal agency. So they will be providing an update, and we'll have some time for a Q&A. You want to take it away, guys? Thanks for being here.
Sure. So hi, everybody. This is Matt. Thanks for having me in your space again. We actually have 2 representatives from Administration for Children and Families, if not more. Sorry if I'm mistaken there, but we have Paul Noski, Regional Manager at Region 10, and Josh Lee, the Program Specialist. And I just wanted to say at the outset that they're going to present some background information on this topic that I think a lot of members of this group will be well aware of. So while I recognize that that's a review, I think that's a good context for the introduction. And, there are many topics within background checks that we could get to, but we only have a 45-minute segment. So I guess I'm just kind of viewing this as an initial, establish meeting folks from Region 10 and seeing kind of the high level federal requirements that you may already be aware of as a refresher. And then we can kind of get into some of the more specifics and have time for Q&A. So sorry, Meryl, to jump in there because this is more your presentation, but I think Region 10 slides are up first.
Thank you, Matt. No worries at all. Feel free to jump in anytime. And again, thank you everybody for having us. I think the PowerPoint currently showing is actually the background check one, not the one from Region X. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I think we had the Region X slides after yours in the presentation, so we can skip ahead to the Region X slides, and then when it is your time to do your slides, Meryl, then we'll just do a screen share. Does that work? Yeah, that works. Thank you, Erin. Great.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Noski, and I'm the Regional Program Manager for the Office of Child Care in Region 10. We're not Region X, but Region 10. And we use Roman numerals, and I prefer the 10 myself, but been overruled by AC.
That's my bad, Paul. I thought Region X sounded pretty cool. So.
Yeah. So I'm the Regional Program Manager, and I'd just like to introduce our team before we get started today, because we have Joshua Lee from Region 10, and he is the new Program Specialist. Michael Kobita, we lost Michael Kobita last month. He is now working in our policy office back in Washington, D.C. And we have our background check expert, Lisa Clifford from our National Subsidy Center, as well as Kelly Walker who is with our subsidy center as well. So I'm going to actually turn it over to them to provide some background, because I think it's really important for us to have a background about the federal requirements that Congress has passed these federal requirements. And so they have dictated this in statute to us to implement. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Lisa Clifford, and then we'll have some Q&A after.
Well, hi, everybody. And I'll just let you know whenever to turn the slide or whatever the case might be. But thank you for the opportunity to present to the Washington Early Learning Advisory Council on the topic of comprehensive background checks. For over 30 years, under the Child Care and Development Block Grant Act, the CCDF program has been helping low-income working families pay for childcare and improve the quality of childcare for all children. In 2014, Congress reauthorized the CCDBG Act, which requires states, territories, and tribal nations to include comprehensive background checks on all childcare staff members as defined in the Act. Today, I'll provide a short overview of the background check requirements, including the categories of checks, applicability to providers, and staff disqualifying crimes and appeals. So the slide that's up right now captures a lot of information in one place. This is a nice tool to print off and have at the ready as a cheat sheet and as a quick reference guide. As you can see, it captures the applicability of the rule, the individuals that it applies to, and the required checks. The background check requirements applies to all licensed, regulated, and registered childcare providers, CCDF providers, and current and prospective childcare staff members. The individuals subject to the background check requirements are those that are employed by the provider for compensation, contracted employees, those who care for, supervise, or have unsupervised access to children in care, and adults living in a family childcare home. This definition, like the definition of a childcare provider, is broad. It encompasses not only caregivers, teachers, or directors, but also janitors, cooks, and other employees of a childcare provider who may not regularly engage with children, but whose placement at the facility gives them the opportunity for unsupervised access. Volunteers are not specifically included in the Act, and they are not specifically included in the CCDF regulation. Therefore, states have the discretion to create their own policies and screening processes for volunteers. However, it is the Administration of Children and Families' view that volunteers who have not had background checks may not be left with children unsupervised. Volunteers who have unsupervised access to children must have background checks that comply with the statute. Background checks are required prior to employment and at least every 5 years. Now I'm going to the next. So the background check requirements are broken down into 3 categories: the national checks, the in-state checks, and the interstate checks. The national checks include 2 checks, and these are the FBI criminal history check with fingerprints and the NCIC NSOR, or National Sex Offender Registry check, commonly referred to as the NCIC NSOR. The in-state checks include 3 components, and those are the criminal history check with fingerprints, the sex offender registry check, and the child abuse and neglect registry check. In most states, you only have to fingerprint once, and you can get both the national FBI and the in-state criminal history check with that same print. The interstate checks include 3 components, and those are the criminal history checks, sex offender registry check, and the child abuse and neglect registry check. And those would be completed in all states and or territories where the individual or prospective individual has resided within the previous 5 years. Next slide. So there are 5 that must be completed on all child care staff members, which include the 2 national checks and the 3 in-state checks. That means everyone that is subject to the background checks or wants to work in childcare must go through these 5 checks. The 3 interstate checks must be completed for each of the additional states or territories where the individual has resided within the preceding 5 years. That means anyone that has lived outside of Washington within the past 5 years must do all 3 interstate checks in addition to the 2 national checks and the 3 in-state checks. As stated, these checks must be completed within a 45-day turnaround time. Next slide. Tribes are also subject to the comprehensive background checks, and the final rule does allow tribes flexibility to propose an alternative approach to background checks and must receive the Administration for Children and Families approval. A staff member would be ineligible to be employed by a child care provider if any of the following apply. The individual refuses to consent to the criminal background check. The individual knowingly makes a material false statement in connection with the criminal background check. The individual is registered or is required to be registered on any sex offender registry or repository or national sex offender registry. The individual has been convicted of a felony listed within the act, or the individual has been convicted of a violent misdemeanor committed as an adult against a child that's listed in the act. And also states, territories, and tribes have flexibility to disqualify staff members based on a conviction of a crime not listed. This typically occurs when the state, territory, or tribe has additional laws that may disqualify a staff member. Next slide. So the disqualifying felonies are those listed within the slide. Those include murder, arson, child abuse and neglect, crimes against children, including pornography, spousal abuse, kidnapping, crimes involving rape or sexual assault, physical assault or battery, and drug-related offenses committed within the past 5 years.
Lisa,
Next
if I
slide.
could, yes, thank you. I think we're one slide off.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Disqualifying crimes. Yeah. So thanks. Child abuse, child endangerment, sexual assault, and child pornography would be included in the violent misdemeanors that disqualify an individual. Next slide. So now let's talk when let's see, what do we have? Go ahead and go to the next slide. Yeah. So now let's talk about when a child care provider is not required to submit a background check for a staff member. If a staff member receives a background check that included all the required components within the past 5 years while employed by or seeking employment by another child care provider in Washington, and Washington gave a qualifying result to the first provider for the staff member, and the staff member is employed by a child care provider within Washington or has been separated from employment from a child care provider for less than 180 days, they would not need to submit a background check for that staff member. So next slide. Provisional employment. So when can a staff member begin work? A prospective staff member may not begin work until one of the following results has been returned as satisfactory. The FBI fingerprint check or a state criminal check using fingerprints in the state or territory where the staff member resides. In both checks, the fingerprints are required. So until determination is made on all checks, the prospective staff member must be supervised at all times by someone who has already received a qualifying result on a background check within the past 5 years. Washington may pose additional requirements beyond the minimum requirement. Next slide should be eligibility determination. Who can make the eligibility determination? It is the lead agency's responsibility to make the determination regarding a child care staff member's eligibility for employment. It also requires that the lead agency provide a response for the background check to the child care provider in the statement that indicates only whether the prospective staff member is eligible or ineligible. This must be done without revealing specific disqualifying information or other information regarding the individual. If the staff member is ineligible, the lead agency must provide information about each specific disqualifying crime or finding to the prospective staff member, as well as information on how to appeal the results of the background check to challenge the accuracy and completeness. Next slide. So one of the resources out there that states and territories can participate in is the FBI National Fingerprint File Program, commonly referred to as NFF. Here are the list of states that are currently participating in NFF. Currently, there are 26 participating states. So the FBI has direct access and automatically checks NFF states' criminal history repositories as part of its search in addition to the FBI database. So if a child care staff member previously lived in one of these 26 NFF states, the FBI fingerprint check will satisfy the requirement to perform an interstate criminal history check because the FBI check will automatically search the NFF state's database directly and provide that information within the results. Another bonus to being an NFF state is that the requirement of responding to another state on a criminal history record request will be satisfied because the other state will already receive that information when they conduct the FBI check on the individual. This is an important step in meeting the requirements to responding to other states quickly. So the National Center on Subsidy Innovation and Accountability, NCSIA, is here to assist and support lead agencies. Here are a few of the items that we have done for other lead agencies. Lead agencies can reach out to the regional office to request technical assistance around comprehensive background checks. And that's it for this part of the presentation. I'll stop. I guess I'm not sharing my screen. And so the next part, I think there's some questions, and I don't know if you had any questions as far as the presentation, and then I think you guys also had additional questions as well.
Yeah, I put my questions in the chat.
So do we want to tackle questions in chat as we go, as in right now? And who takes the lead on that?
That's entirely up to you guys.
Okay. So I see one from, maybe this is from you, Julie. Based on this info, if our state would allow for fingerprinting to occur immediately, oh gosh, I just lost it. Sorry. Immediately, the person could be hired as soon as that clears.
So I'll go ahead and kind of help start that conversation, or however you guys want to go around that. That is something that could happen. You know, it's at least allowed in the CCDF rule that at least the FBI with fingerprints or the state criminal history check with fingerprints is completed. The lead agency would have to make a notification and provide that information and make that decision to do that.
They would have to work supervised.
Right. Supervised, and that means that they would have to work supervised by somebody that's completed that background check within the past 5 years.
Yeah. And does that happen in many of the states, Lisa?
As far as provisional hire, there's several states that do it, but I also know that there's also several states that are still working on implementing it as well. So, and I think, you know, just one thing to bring up, and this might be the opportunity to talk about it as well, you know, as far as partnerships that also are included within the comprehensive background checks, because the lead agency certainly doesn't do this alone. It does, you know, definitely partner with their criminal justice partners within the state and their child welfare agencies within the state as well.
Great. There was an NFF question there. Do you see that, Lisa?
No, sorry, I wasn't looking.
Being it that our state is not participating in NFF, does that cause any delay in our clearances when someone has lived in other states in the last 5 years? And maybe Meryl would be best to speak to this one.
I could certainly add some input,
Yeah.
but go ahead, Meryl.
I was just going to say that Washington not, you know, engaging in NFF, that might impact other states. But as far as when we run the background check, if it's an NFF state, we don't have to do that extra component of requesting an interstate check if that state is NFF.
So just to clarify, Meryl, you're saying it's no impact on our timelines for our background checks that we are not an NFF state.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think also we know in Washington state that Head Start and childcare are often administered, programs that are administered together. And so that provisional hire for either having the state check done with fingerprints or the FBI check to occur with fingerprints prior to a childcare staff member starting. How that's different for Head Start is for that provisional hire being supervised. I know Washington State can't separate that out right now, and that's a Washington State implementation issue with you all, but it's for Head Start, they have to have that CAN check. So if you're a Head Start provider, you have to have that federal background check with fingerprint or the state check done with fingerprint and that CAN check done, child abuse and neglect check done. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that as well. We didn't cover that, but we know because Head Start and childcare are really in many cases implemented together, that's a little bit different in our laws.
All right, another question in chat here. Does this apply to an employee who is not directly employed by the provider but serves multiple providers, for example, a regional employee like a facilities manager, assuming they don't have unsupervised access to children?
So, yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and start on this one. So like a regional, and I'm thinking like KinderCare, La Petite, some of those big organizations that have regionals. So typically it seems like they always had at least a home base somewhere within a childcare facility, that has an office there. I don't know if that's true or not in your case or not, but I think that's where the state, the CCDF rule, if they're going to have unsupervised access to children, on a regular basis, that's where that rule says that, then they do have to have that background check. They are employed by KinderCare or La Petite, because it does definitely preference that they're employed by and have regular compensation. But if they don't fall into that category, then I think that also leaves it up to the lead agency for that flexibility on whether, I don't think they fall into a volunteer role. So I don't know if that directly answers it, but I think, it really definitely does say if they're employed by the child care provider and they would be an employee of the child care.
Another question in chat may be related a bit. Given that licensors are permitted to be in the center and sometimes unaccompanied by the child care staff in order to not be out of ratio compliance, are licensors subject to the full background check?
So as far as the CCDF rule, it applies to childcare providers. It does clearly write out that, and I'd have to pull that back up in the presentation, but to licensed childcare providers, registered providers, regulated providers, and any CCDF childcare providers. So this is directly for the lead agency to implement on the childcare providers.
And then what can the federal agency do to support our state in separating components of the background check? This would help us remove a barrier to hiring.
So I might need a little bit more information on that to say, so are you talking about maybe separating out? Is it going back to like the FBI fingerprint I might need some more information on that.
Well,
Yes.
I think I can cover that.
Okay.
So what I think that we could do is we have technical assistance through Lisa and also Kelly Walker, and they can support you in Washington State in mapping out different processes, the timeline that it takes, where the hangups are in the background checks system. I think everybody maybe has a unique story to talk about it. Is it in getting their fingerprints? Is it in working with that contractor? Once everything goes into merit, how long does it take to get a fingerprint done at that time? Or, realistically, if you are hiring somebody who hasn't lived within the state for the last 5 years, at this time, we just know that, it may take a little bit longer. And I apologize. I've talked to Susan about this on occasion too. It's like Congress developed this, they put this in statute, and we, have to implement it because the Congress is telling us to do that. So, we don't have that ability to waive that authority to do that. But what we could do is provide that technical assistance to see where in the process things are being hung up, and then also it may be about systems changes. Your system may not allow that separation of the different checks out, and it may be you having to work with the state and the state legislature to get a system in place that works better for you all. We can provide that peer-to-peer technical assistance with other states that do separate and what systems they use to process background checks. So there's a lot of things that we can do to facilitate that knowledge and understanding and process mapping. But, sometimes I think too is that the state has, these answers. It's just maybe a systems change that needs to occur. And unfortunately, like I said, each state administers their background checks process just a little bit different. Their systems are a little bit different.
Can I ask a question, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
So we understand that the system is flawed and that it can't be separated. But when is there anything in the federal laws that prohibits the allowance of, let's say, for instance, if there is a background check service that we could pay for that could get the background checks cleared quickly so that we could do supervised work in a center while DCOF completes their process? Is there anything that precludes us or the state from allowing that to happen so that our centers are not impacted by not being able to hire people and place them in centers?
Right. And I'm going to actually turn that question over to Lisa.
Yeah, and so it is a requirement of the lead agency to perform the background checks to make these requests and perform it. And they definitely work, as we said earlier, in partnership with their criminal justice partners and their child welfare agencies. So yeah, so it is a duty of the lead agency, not the child care provider.
No, but that isn't the question I'm asking. We want the lead agency to do their background checks, but the issue right now is because the federal and the state are coupled, it takes longer than we have staff who are willing to wait around to be cleared in order to work. So what I'm asking is there an interim solution while these background checks are happening by the lead agency that could do one step of the process so that they could work supervised in the centers while these other background checks are being cleared? Because right now, the only solution is wait, and that's not working. So what I'm asking for is what is an alternative to meet that mandate? Well, because we're not saying don't have DCOF or whoever do the clearance. Just can there be something done in the short term to mitigate the problem of how long the process for clearance takes?
And I think that goes back to what, there's the provisional hire that could be done as far as them, after the FBI or the state criminal check comes back with fingerprints. If that's implemented in Washington, then they'd be able to work supervised while the rest of those checks got completed. But then Paul also brought up, as far as Head Start, they have, that CAN requirement. But otherwise, it's the lead agency that makes that determination, and the lead agency that implements that provisional hire piece as well.
So there isn't anything in the federal law that would preclude the lead agency from allowing another step in the process to solve this. That's what I'm trying to get at. So
yeah,
is that a yes or a no?
Well, I think there is so it's kind of a two-part. There is a yes as far as provisional hire,
okay,
that the CCDF rule does allow. But that's the only part. The otherwise the background checks all have to be completed.
Sure. I get that, and we want that. We definitely want that, but we also want to be able to
Yeah.
hire people and place them in a timely manner.
Right. And I totally get that as well. I know that
Mhm.
that's you want them in the door and into the rooms. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Hey, thanks. And so just to piggyback off of what Paul said earlier, I think there are things that, as the state works out their processes, and I know there's a question on here about the 5-year mark as well, that there might be programs that we can, have those discussions with their criminal justice partners about whether FBI ramp back might be a solution to help with any of that, or state ramp backs. States, other than Washington, face the same dilemma as far as trying to make this burden easier for the childcare providers, and are trying to come up with innovative solutions, and creating some of the different processes within their systems. And so those are always things that we can discuss too.
I can chime in real quick here, and Paul and Lisa, I really appreciate you guys coming on today and talking to our child care community. Provisional hires, right? That's what comes up often. And so obviously the Region 10 allows that. And so I want to give Merrill kind of a chance of some challenges, as a lot of you guys know this, and the challenges behind that regarding Washington State and our current system. So I want to just give Merrill a chance real quick. And then the other thing too, Susan, I wanted to, and you guys probably know this already, we have a lot of providers right now that have changed their hiring process, of what we've heard. So they will post a position, mostly in centers, that requires them to have a clear background check before they apply or before they are considered for employment. And so we have heard a lot of providers do that right now. So it's free of charge. It's good for 5 years. So that's just one thing that a lot of providers are doing right now before they're considered for employment. But Mary, I want to give you a quick chance to kind of talk about why we can't do provisional hires right now.
Thank you, Ruben. It's in one of the slides that we put together, so I'll go ahead and skip forward to it and also share my screen. So give me one moment. Can y'all see it okay? Thumbs up?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so that is one of the most common questions that we get and we've gotten for years now. And it has been researched and explored because, again, to point to what Lisa had said, that, we have to work with other agencies when it comes to this process, and we're just a step in the process. So we've got the FBI, we've got the Washington State Patrol, and we've also got DSHS that we have to rely on to process the information and get it back to us. And one of the things, we've explored in working with DSHS, and they've been, open to looking into everything with us to see if it's possible, what the system could do now. Right now, the system isn't in a place to where it could separate those components. It would require a change to DSHS's system and potentially the Washington State Patrol system. So that adds another, agency that would have to agree to make complex updates to their system in order for it to happen. We also wanted to provide some data because, that's really, what we have to be able to look at and see how long this is taking. And when we have that data, that gives us a better argument to DSHS or the other agencies to say, hey, this is taking a really long time. We really need to prioritize this. And even if it's a system update that, costs the money, that it would be worth it if we're seeing a significant delay in those two components. And then we could work with them to enhance our system to be able to do this. But I have two sets of data here. One was from 2022 when DCYF contacted DSHS to explore that option They looked at, DSHS looked at 5 months of data and indicated that 98%, and that's nearly 27,000 fingerprint checks, averaged about 110 minutes between the receipt of the FBI fingerprint results and the Washington State Patrol results. And then DCYF also revisited this with DSHS in December of last year. We met with them to get an idea of what the data looks like now, to see if anything has changed. And based on 6 months of data from 2023, the average was 90 minutes. So basically those two pieces are processed together, but it's not taking a long time. There's not a long delay between when the FBI processes it and when the WSP processes it. So it's, when we present that argument of the delay to them, there's not a lot of incentive or push for them to say, okay, we're going to make all these crazy system changes if it's only taking this short amount of time for each agency to process the results. So if we were to get the WSP results first, then, most of the time, average 90 minutes later, we're going to get the FBI results as well. We also, looked at the current average turnaround times, which do change. They change from week to week, month to month. And we're seeing progress in 2024. And currently, the average time it takes for all three agencies, WSP, FBI, and DSHS, to process the fingerprint results is 2 calendar days. So based on the turnaround times, again, that's what we have to use to say we need this done, but it's just, we don't have a lot of ammo to push for that, for them to make those complex system changes. But
where's their data coming from?
It comes from their system. They produce a very large report with all the turnaround times between each point in the process.
So they don't believe our lived experience then? Do we need to, as a sector, need to start documenting each? Because I have a person who submitted their fingerprints on January 11th and still hasn't. So I'm just saying, I think you need to, I think data is only as good as sometimes a source or how you interpret it. So I'm not buying it that it's only a 90-minute turnaround, because I have not talked to one provider that says this is a quick process. So that's food for thought, but I think we need to be checking in with providers and what their actual experience is compared to whatever some kind of internal data source is, because it's not what's happening in real life on boots on the ground kind of deal.
And this is just simply averages. So, you're right. Those individual circumstances that happen, it does impact hiring. And these are real people, they're real problems. And how do we fix the ones that do take longer? But, when it comes to looking at it and presenting the reasoning to them, they, want to look at the full picture of things. But we did also, from this data, we found that it was about 99% of the results had less than a day delay. So that 90 minutes, that was the average, but about 99% of them did only have, a day in between receiving those results. There were some that took longer, and those are ones that we set aside and we pinpoint and we try to figure out why, and try to find the source of it and troubleshoot and fix it. But you're right, it's not just about looking at the whole, but the actual individuals. That's important too.
Hey, Meryl, I just want to acknowledge what Susan was saying, and Julie posted a comment in chat related to it. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Meryl, but really bullet 2 is getting to the time between the 2 fingerprint criminal checks, state and federal. But then, of course, there's a timeline between all of those fingerprint criminal elements and all the other elements. That's what this 110 minutes and 90 minutes are referring to. So the point you're making still stands within this context. I think what it gets to is that given that multiple agencies are using DSHS's system to get their background check and may have lesser background check requirements than the federal ones we're seeking to comply with, they're only seeing a possible time savings of those 90 minutes, 110 minutes. And that figures into the calculus about whether the state as a whole would go forward with an initiative like this. And I'm not saying that means no, I'm just saying that's the context. I hope I stated that accurately, Meryl.
No, you're right. It's the reality, unfortunately, that, you know, we're a small portion and this is very meaningful. That the purpose is extremely meaningful of what we're doing these background checks for, but it is just a small portion of DSHS background checks as a whole. They process hundreds of thousands of them every year, and they're for multiple programs. And those multiple programs, you know, they have options to hire prior to the background check being completed. So it's hard to be the little man putting up a big fight against a lot of other programs that aren't running into the same problems. I think Jared has his hand up, maybe.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say, first, I do just want to recognize, like, we've seen significant speed ups, you know, like this process from what it looked like a year ago or 2 years ago, you know what I mean? Like there has been vast improvement. So like, I do want to like, just like shout that out, like at first, and say that I appreciate it. You know, having it be free it's the only way this has any chance of not being an enormous mess. So I think there are changes to help. But I think that the two things that are coming up seem like, one is like, is there a way to quickly get something for someone that's provisional if they aren't cleared within 2 days, right? Like, is there an automatically triggered process or something like that? They can be working on trying to get some type of provisional like clearance. And then the second is there a way that we can cut down all of the steps it takes to get a background check? Like I would love to put like a link, you know, Ruben spoke to hiring processes. I would love to have a link in our job description that says like, click here and we can fire up this process right now from your cell phone, you know, as opposed to when people apply and then they interview and I'm sure everybody's got like their page email that's like, go into Merit. Merit looks like this. Get a Merit number. Merit's going to send you an email. Get an email from Merit. Go into Merit. Go into the third tab from the Merit. Apply for a background check. After you apply for a background check, sometime later, you'll get an email. Then that email will have directions to set up a fingerprinting appointment. Then go to the fingerprinting appointment. Like, you know, is there a way that like that process, you know, knowing that this is going to need to be done before people can work, that like it can be like streamlined, you know, of like, hey, you're thinking about working with kids. You know what I mean? Like, let's get you straight there.
So you're talking about more of like getting a head start job on all the things beforehand. Is that kind of where you're going with it?
Yeah, it's just if there's a way, like this just like starting the background check, you know, before you get hired, rock and roll. Like, I'm game. But like, can there be some look at like, can that be a 1-step process instead of an 8, you know, or a 9-step process? So someone that's just randomly applying for jobs, you know, because these are entry level folks, you know, they're applying to our job, but they're also applying at the pizzeria, you know, or they're applying, you know, at this like other job. And if we make it that much harder to apply, you know, for these jobs, people just won't do it.
Right. No, I think that's a great way, outside of the box way of thinking of it. And we actually have, in one of my other slides, there's something that, you know, may provide a solution to this as an option. It was just completed back in 2023. But DCYF did co-chair, and I'm showing it on my screen. Hopefully everybody can still see the slide. But we completed a feasibility study with other agencies involved and basically put together a bunch of information over months. Everybody met and came up with some options and proposed solutions of what a, centralized background check office would look like, with a centralized system where basically all of the background checks in Washington are processed in one system. So anytime somebody fingerprints, to work OSPI, that result is stored in the system, and other agencies like DCYF, DSHS, we could all access those results, and an applicant wouldn't have to go through the process of reprinting. And we could still make our own decisions because all of the different, agencies and programs, they have different requirements for their decisions, and we don't want to take over theirs. They have more standardized decision-making processes, whereas we do the suitability assessments, and it's not just a yes or no. So we would still get that opportunity. And on the slide, I kind of just highlighted what solutions came out of the study. And of course, that was to get the centralized technology, and summarize, kind of what that would look like as far as sharing the results and then making our own decisions. Another goal was to get that turnaround time reduced. Individuals with no record to 1 business day, and individuals with a record. I think it was broken down to kind of individuals with a limited record, 3 days. If they have a more extensive history, 7 business days. And then federal wrap back services, which is a little bit more challenging to get. There are some against it, but it basically is a system that if, an individual has fingerprinted, and we have that in the system, if they have new criminal history, then we would get pinged, and we could review that history and make sure everything is safe. And, only the system would have that information. It wouldn't go out to everybody. So it would be very carefully handled. So it's not something that we would necessarily do. It was just a solution that was proposed as an option that would prevent us applicants from having to reprint all the time and the renewals. And this is just a small little piece of the report. So I did include in the PowerPoint, which will be shared after, the full report of what came from that study. It's very long, but it has a lot of good information. And we also, just yesterday, there were some long-term goals, proposed from the study, but there were also some short-term. Hey, what can we do right now with the resources we have available to, get some of these things accomplished, or at least do better. And one of those things is legislation. Is Washington State Patrol is planning to propose legislation next session, because this session was a short one this year, that they're going to propose an RCW that basically allows the sharing of fingerprint results across different agencies in the state that care for vulnerable populations to share fingerprint results. And that means that, if somebody goes and fingerprints to work in an adult family home or a nursing home, or to work with children or folks with a disability, that those fingerprint results are stored. And when somebody applies to work in childcare, our system will, when it connects with DSHS, they'll recognize that they already have a fingerprint result, and that information can be shared with us. So that legislation will be proposed next session by WSP. That is the plan right now. So it's a step in the right direction, and it will eliminate folks who have fingerprinted for other agencies to have to reprint. Sorry, that was a lot of information. So if you have any follow-up questions, throw them in the chat. And as always, if we can't get to them, then we will get to them and provide them to you.
Yeah, I just want to jump in for a minute. We are scheduled to be on break from 11:45 to noon. But those of you that want to stick around and ask questions, feel free. And I'm hoping that this is a topic that we can revisit in a future. I don't know if Paul would be willing to come back. I am sorry, I don't remember the other Region 10 person's name that was here, but we would love to coordinate that. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, Josh and Lisa, and we're always willing to come back and have this conversation. I did put something in the chat about like all background checks are not considered, equal, so that like some of those healthcare provider checks, they don't have the authority to run that NCIC check on those providers. So when they go through the system, they legally don't have authority to do that NCIC check on some of those professions. CCDF, we got that authority through our law when Congress passed the law to do that check for states. And so, when we talk about background checks, they're not always, there's different components of that background check, and those federal components, those federal databases, you have to have that authority to check that. Some of those, like the NCIC. So
thank you, Paul, for throwing that in. I should have touched on that as well. We would still, complete the required components for CCDF and child care background checks. That would be done separately, but we have an automated system, so we could still do our complete the requirements for child care background checks, but just that fingerprint result that is causing a lot of delays, just having to go through the fingerprint process in general, those delays would be eliminated if applicants have already actually fingerprinted. But all the other components we would take care of when we do our piece.
Sounds like we need to have some advocacy around funding so that the state can separate the components regardless of the data. I'm confused by the data. It sounded like maybe other types of people or employees that are working in different fields or related fields might have been included in all that data, even though they're able to work under supervision while it clears. It just sounds like we need.
That might have been me using confusing language. So I think when Meryl's presenting data on the background checks, that we're talking about childcare background checks, but the issue is that multiple state agencies and types of individuals are using DSHS's background check. And so the time savings between the two criminal background check components, the fact that it's so low limits kind of the interest overall, could limit the interest overall in changing the system when we're just a component of it. I'm not saying it does, but I'm saying that that's part of what we look at in understanding the context. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I guess it leaves me wondering what kind of data would be needed to move the needle on the advocacy for changing the system.
And it's like every time you'll present a topic, I have a slide for it. I don't know if it will answer all the questions or solve all the problems, but we do have our IT team, and I think I mentioned this in the last meeting, but it's progressed since then. That is our IT team, specifically child care background checks. In the child care background check system, we're going to be able to have a report available that has those turnaround times between each point in the process, from when the applicant schedules a fingerprint appointment to when they actually fingerprint, to when the fingerprints are processed, to when DSHS distributes the results to us, and when we actually finalize the background check result. So we'll have more limited data for us. And if we're seeing, those longer delays for childcare applicants specifically, then we can advocate or go back to DSHS and bring it to the table. And we have quarterly meetings with DSHS as well. So anytime we see anything that stands out that we feel like is worth troubleshooting with them, then we will certainly bring it up with them. But the data reports that we are going to have available are going to be super helpful for that.
Where are we on fingerprint locations and appointment times? And I mean, that's still a big issue. Like, did Senate Bill 5774 pass? It
passed in the Senate. So it's in the House right now. And I believe the last day for the House to make a decision is February 21st. So we're still holding out hope for that to pass. And that will, of course, it's another step forward to trying to help prevent delays and provide more fingerprint availability.
Has there been opposition to this bill?
I do not know. I haven't heard of any strong or loud opposition. But it's still, it got to the House, and the Senate, obviously they didn't have any opposition. It passed with pretty flying colors. So hopefully we're really rooting for this bill, and we're already working with the offices where we're going to provide the services to have everything ready to go in the event that it passes. And there's also an emergency clause in the bill should it pass for it to go into effect immediately.
So at the beginning of this meeting, before we got into the background check topic, Sandra had asked a question about the suitability checks. So I don't know if Susan or Sandra's able to unmute and ask her question, or if somebody's able to speak to that. Was somebody here for that? Were you here for that, Matt?
I recall.
Okay, it looks like
I think-
Sandra unmuted, so she can ask her question.
Yes, I did unmute. Good morning. Thank you. It was in response to the background check when DCYF is doing their review of the fingerprints results, and they flag or see something, that they will then do an assessment, and they will do a outreach to the applicant to talk with them. And I've had over the past 2 years, 2 applicants who were disqualified, but they told me they were never contacted, to talk about what the charges were that were a hindrance. So I was just curious to know, does this happen all the time, or is this just when our background unit decides that they want to reach out, or is it sometimes just a flat no way Jose type response? That's what it is.
And that's a great question. Thank you. With suitability assessments, there are some crimes that are on the Secretary's list that are federal disqualifiers permanent. So at that point, they don't even go to a suitability assessment. We have to disqualify. But if something does make it to the suitability assessment process, it's a very thorough process. And our suitability assessment staff, they reach out to the applicant, they set up an interview. It's a trauma-informed interview. They ask questions, really trying to highlight change in behavior, rehabilitation. What have they done to show that they're safe now and that their history doesn't reflect who they are? Because we know people can change, and that's really the point of the suitability assessment process, to try to pass people and give people the opportunity. But in the event that they are disqualified, it's a very small portion. I'd have to get the stats, which I can provide as a follow-up to this meeting, of how many individuals don't pass a suitability assessment. If they don't pass, they're actually mailed a letter, certified letter, that gives them the options to appeal the decision. And they can also request a reconsideration. So, if somebody doesn't pass and they want to call or request through the early learning background check email address and say, hey, can somebody else take a second look at this? Maybe they didn't provide extra paperwork. Maybe they feel like they didn't have a good interview. We're always open to reconsidering. But if they, get disqualified and they want to go through the appeal process, that's outlined in a letter to them.
Thank you, Meryl.
Meryl, Susan, what are the active steps that you guys take to eliminate bias in your determinations for who is considered suitable or not? Because I see that as a very risky, easy to not be equitable, fair, whatever the right words are, system, because it's based on humans making choices. And I'm concerned about that.
Yes, definitely. And the bias, it's not easy. And that's where we try to tell staff, this is not a place where we say we don't have bias. Everybody has biases. We have to acknowledge that, and we have to say, what can we do to make sure that we're being fair? And it's trained in staff. Is it perfect? No, but staff, we have found that they're really rooting for people. They want people to pass. They want to hear their stories. It's a kind of a, rewarding experience to listen to people and how they've changed, and most have. But keeping that bias in check, I think it's a constant thing to be intentional about it. And
what are the steps? Like, what are the actual, because it takes active steps to remove bias from the and I want to know what that is. Like, remove their names. Do you remove any descriptions about what they look? I'm just asking because there's lots of things that can be done, and I'm wanting to know what is done in that process to eliminate as much bias as possible, given the fact that what you just said is everyone has it.
Right. And we have, as far as formal processes of what we do, we complete trainings, of course, and in our actual process of completing the assessment, we can't remove names because we do have to, request records or police reports of a person. We don't really ask for characteristics, except that, basically what the circumstances were. We let them give their side of what happened. And we take that into account. We know that a police report is not always going to share the truth. And then the justice system is not always just. And that's the whole role of the unit, we recognize that in general. And that's the purpose of doing an assessment, is try to give them another chance. And we also have a tiered background check or a suitability assessment decision-making process, which has really added a lot of checks and balances and trying to keep that bias in check. And basically the suitability assessment specialist, they complete the assessment and they can approve an applicant, which I think about 92% are approved at the specialist level. If they do not feel comfortable with approving, then they take it up to their supervisor, and their supervisor will review it. And a lot of times they'll approve it. And then if the supervisor can't approve it, they take it up to the background check manager and they take a look at it. And most of the time it is approved at that point. Some of them are not approved. The ones that are really concerning, they'll come up to me. So there's, potentially 4 different people making the decision to try to, if one person might have a little bias, then hopefully once it goes to the next person, that bias is chipped away at a little bit at a time and gaining a lot of different perspective. And we, if we get one that's really tough, we'll have a meeting about it. All of us will come together and say, hey, is there any way we can get to a yes here safely? So we don't handle them lightly, but thankfully the majority of the ones that we do complete, they're pretty obvious that the person has changed and that they're safe, because most of the crimes that we see are very minor in nature.
So Meryl, what I thought I heard you say is that if there's somebody that needs the suitability portion, you guys would contact them to hear their side. But what I thought I heard Sandra say is that some of her staff were eliminated or denied without being contacted for their side. So does that happen?
That
Well,
could
Julie,
be there is a permanent disqualifier on their background check. So we can't even do suitability assessments if there is a federal permanent disqualifier on the DCYF secretaries list. So in that case, unfortunately, we can't even move to the next step of the suitability assessment. They're just disqualified up front.
are those flagged on the secretary's list? Do you know, Meryl?
I'm sorry, are they
flagged on the secretary's list? So if we looked at the secretary list, we would know which ones were federal offenses.
Yes, on the
Okay.
secretary's list, and we can also provide that as a material to send out. But if you want to look at it beforehand, if you just Google DCYF secretary's list, it's one of the first ones that will pop up. And it has a list of, what's permanently disqualifying for childcare or early learning and what would be eligible for a suitability assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Okay, so we're back from break. So if you have more comments, please put them in the chat. Or there it is. Jessica put a survey in there. Make sure you're doing the survey. And we'll hopefully all the comments are captured so that they can be answered if they weren't able to be answered here today. Katie?
Yeah. Well, we want to
I'm
bring
sorry.
in-
I'm supposed to be like thanking all of you for showing up. We're so glad that for all of you with the background check unit, state and federal, that have been here today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all for having us. And just as a last final goodbye, thank you all again so much. And we do appreciate your ideas, perspective. And we are working behind the scenes to try to make this better. I just want y'all to know that because we really do care. These are the things that keep me up at night. But Mariah, she put the suitability assessment stats in the chat as well, if y'all want to take a look at those.
Perfect. Thank you, Meryl. I've just been quiet. I've just been listening to all this information and, it really helps us to understand, what the process is, why it can take so long, what you guys are doing behind the scenes. It really does help us, to give us that, okay, they are working on it. We're just not sitting here for weeks or a couple months waiting for a staff member to be, whether they're good to go or not. All right, so now we're going to switch to the legislation. I know there's been so much going on down in Olympia. And so we have the DCYF Senior Policy Advisor, Melissa Cheeseman, with us today. And she's going to go over all the updates with all the bills and everything going on down there in Olympia. So welcome, Melissa. Thank you so much.
Everyone. Thank you, Katie. As mentioned, my name is Melissa Cheeseman, and I am the Senior Policy Advisor for the Early Learning and Child Care Portfolio at DCYF. This presentation is going to really focus on DCYF government affairs legislative updates. Specifically, I'm going to be presenting legislative updates related to early learning and child care. So today's agenda, we'll provide some information, or I'll provide some information where we're at in the 2024 session, provide an overview of bills of interest that we are tracking and are still moving, and walk through how to get involved. Essentially, I would like to just walk through like a bill page, couple of other resources, things just to help people get their voices heard. And then we're going to walk through DCYF supplemental budget requests that were included in the governor's budget. One last thing I want to really say about this session is that, it's been really rapid, it's been fast, it's been very busy, particularly in the early learning and childcare space. But really since cutoff, February 5th, which was the fiscal cutoff, it's really died down a lot. And so now what our next big hurdle will be is gearing up for the House and the Senate to release their versions of both budgets, capital and operating. Yeah, next slide. So everyone who's participated in government affairs presentations, this slide and then the next one should look pretty familiar. I'm just going to really touch on the realities that are shaping this ledge session and the budget itself. And just like real quickly, a few of you have already heard this, but I want to just do a little bit of level setting and background. So our state operates on a biennium, which means on odd years like 2023, last year, the legislature's regular session was long, lasting 105 days. During that odd year, the legislature must decide on a biennium budget, a 2-year budget. And that enacted budget is essentially what's being informed now in the supplemental budget year. So this is an even year, supplemental budget year, with a regular session lasting 60 days. The supplemental budget is intended to modify and update the enacted budget, essentially tweaks to the biennium for updated information. An example that I like to give here is essentially updating funding needs related to like more up-to-date reflection of caseload would be a really good example. The supplemental year is not intended to like establish big, new or bold program requests and ideas, particularly if they're attached to dollar amounts. And we'll kind of touch that a little bit more as far as like what the theme is for bills that are really moving, really is caveated on the fact of how much it costs. I guess I just said it, so there you go. The supplemental year's intention is that legislation should be fast and provide edits. I think as far as, economics, there are, the outlook for revenues has been pretty conservative. But even with that, the governor continues to invest in over $1 billion statewide to maintain current programs and initiatives. The governor's budget really does include the supplemental, includes some significant investments related to behavioral health, fentanyl and opiate response, housing those without homes, and climate. So you can imagine with those added initiatives and programs, this left very little funding for additional requests that go beyond current spending levels and funding for new programs or initiatives. This also shapes the legislation that moves through this session, right? Because we're talking about a smaller amount of money to basically divvy up during the supplemental budget. Next slide, please. All right, so just real quickly, I won't really touch a lot on this, but essentially where we're back in fall 2023, DCYF submitted its one request for agency legislation and several decision packages for additional funding. The ones that I'll be presenting later will be the ones that are included in the governor's budget. I want to kind of just like focus you all to this little yellow box at the right-hand side. And there's the green line. That's where we currently are. We're in mid-legislative session. And like to just geek out a little bit because I like to measure things. Today marks the 38th day of the 2024 legislative session. Essentially, we are approximately 60% or 63.33333% of the way through legislative session. Thank you for humoring me. Like I said, measuring things like is very satisfying to me. The regular session will end March 7th. And that's when DCYF begins planning implementation of enacted legislation. Next slide, please. So 2024 leg session. Yesterday was the House of Origin or the first House cutoff, which is the last day for a bill to move out, to move to the opposite house or the second house, unless the bill is necessary to implement the budget. I think that's a really important caveat. And I believe initiatives like that are brought forward from the public also have a different timeline. Otherwise, the bill is considered dead. Next, like I mentioned before, our legislative timeline, about mid to late February, the House and the Senate will release their proposed supplemental versions of the budget. They could be very similar. They could be very different from the govs or each other. So, I mean, I have a little bit of insight, but it's really just based on where the bills were first filed. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but we're expecting the House and the Senate operating budgets to be released I want to say between February 18th and 21st. And the capital budgets for the House and Senate about February 15th to 22nd. Like, we just really can't nail down specific dates at this point. DCYF will then review the different budget versions, compile that analysis, and then provide a presentation on mid-legislative budget updates around the end of February. Some more to come on that. And then there's a couple other cutoffs before the opposite house. There's another fiscal and policy cutoff specifically to the second house or the opposing opposite house. But the next big major cutoff is the opposite or the second house cutoff, which is March 1st. This is the last day for a bill in the opposite or second house, again, unless necessary to implement the budget, to be passed out of the other chamber. If this bill passes out of the second house and is still alive, and if there's two different versions before March 7th, so March 1st is the cutoff, but March 7th is the end of session. During that time, the House and Senate will need to work together on any differences, and one bill goes forward to the governor's desk. Next slide, please. So the next couple slides are going to be specifically on bills that we're still tracking that are still alive, which have been informed by the yesterday, March 13th cutoff. And so I want to apologize right off the bat. The first one is not numbered properly. It is engrossed substitute Senate Bill 6038. I left off the engrossed. Apologies. I updated the descriptions, but not all the numbers. And I've also dropped in the chat a link to the specific bill. So
Melissa, I think
yes.
Lois has a question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. Lois?
Nope, I apologize. I need to lower my hand. Forgive me.
Okay, go on, Melissa.
All right. All right. So this one is effective October 1st, 2024. It expands the B&O tax exemption for childcare providers serving children under the age of 13 or under the age of 19 with a verified special need or court supervision. So the engrossed bill essentially makes it so that the tax exemption applies to businesses that are primarily engaged in providing childcare, and then also adds an expiration date, which wasn't there in my previous presentation on this bill, January 1st, 2035. The bill, however, also waives DCYF's initial and annual licensing fees. There is no effective date in the bill for these sections of the bill. So if it was to be passed in its present form, it would take effect 90 days after the end of regular session. So that would be essentially effective June 5th. The next one, did I drop that in the chat? There we go. All right, the next one, as everyone was just talking about, this is Substitute Senate Bill 5774. This requires DCYF to provide fingerprinting services at early learning and child welfare offices throughout the state. The funding itself in the law is subject to availability of amounts appropriated for this specific purpose. And thus the underlining fiscal note assumes 10 offices. DCYF will be working to prioritize areas that lack convenient access to ensure that we address those fingerprinting services in those areas first. The next bill, just grab that copy. Oh, I see something in the chat. Is welcomed by schools, childcare. Oh, yes, okay. The next one is Substitute House Bill 1945. This adds income eligibility for federal and state food assistance, it adds to income eligibility, federal and state food assistance for Working Connections Child Care, ECAP, and early ECAP programs. It also modifies the definition of ECAP eligible child to include a child who is a member of an assistant unit eligible for or receiving federal or food assistance. So the bill basically for Working Connections childcare and early ECAP, those provisions would go into effect November 1st, 2024, so within this year, whereas the ECAP effective would be pushed out to October 1st, 2030. And really the work around this was really, it was fiscally motivated. Like all these bills, anything that's moving that has a fiscal note attached to it, what I've seen, at least in this space, I can't speak to other spaces, is kind of like some of these back and forth around modifying the law to make it so it passes now, but that's always tangent and related to available funding. And so that's why the effective dates are different, was to reduce costs. The next bill also related to eligibility, and I'm going to drop it in the chat, is Second Substitute House Bill 2124. This expands Working Connections childcare approved activities to include participation in early ECAP and early Head Start. This would also be effective November 1st, 2024. It expands Working Connections childcare eligibility. I mean, I should also say it also expands Working Connections childcare eligibility to include employment in ECAP, early ECAP programs, or Head Start or early Head Start programs, so long as the employee is income eligible. And I believe that's like under 85% state median income. This bill does two more things, so just bear with me. One of the things it does is it modifies the inflationary adjustment rates, or a rate adjustment, essentially requiring every 2 years an inflationary adjustment to the dual language designation subsidy rate enhancement, rather than allowing that to be subject to amounts appropriated for that. Whereas the other rates are subject to the amounts appropriated for that. And those other rates, I believe, are the infant, as well as ECAP program and early ECAP program rates. They're in the substitute, there was a null and void clause added. Essentially, if this isn't funded, this would go away. The governor's budget doesn't include this because this bill was filed after the governor's budget was released. But because this is a House bill, it's very likely it's going to be in the House budget. In fact, I'd be surprised if it wasn't, but unsure about the Senate at this point. And the last one on this slide is our agency request for legislation, substitute, well, not the substitute, but the House Bill 1916. As mentioned before, this particular ARL, I don't think I mentioned it before, never mind. This particular request for legislation really is to ensure that children, or that providers providing early intervention services are being paid for the services provided. And so there's a language change that needs to happen in the underlying statute. And so the way that the fix is written is that instead of saying prior to the month, a month prior to the monthly day count or count day, it's supposed to be the same month as the monthly count day. And then also it refers to the last business day of that month. Additionally, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the nuances of that in just a little bit when we talk about, because this was one of our proposed, like I said, it was agency requested legislation. In the sub, they also added a null and void clause. Again, if this is not funded in the budget, it goes away as well. The governor's budget does include this because, again, it was agency request legislation. They didn't, the governor didn't have to include it, but it was, they knew about it because we filed that early in 2023. This House will likely include it, again, because it's a House bill. The Senate, again, I'm unsure at this point. Next slide, please. So we've got 3 more bills that are still alive, and I'll try not to lament on them too much. But substitute House Bill 2195 is a little complicated because it does several things, and it's actually one of the largest bills that we're tracking right now in this space. So it removes the early learning facilities, or ELF, grant loan award limits for pre-design, pre-development, major construction, purchase of an early learning facility, and minor renovations. It also adds translation services as an allowable administrative cost. The bill prioritizes construction, renovations, and repair grants for those projects that are ready for construction, right? So there's the pre-development, pre-design, and then actually dig ready. Another thing that this bill does is it allows ELF facilities be co-located in housing developments to receive state funding for 90% of the project. The substitute does a couple of things here. It removes the redistribution. So originally, the bill redistributed capital gains revenue that is allotted for the Common School Construction Fund to the ELF development account, but it actually reverses that now. So there isn't this redistribution to the ELF fund. Instead, it adds facilities owned by school districts with preschool and before and after school care programs, either operated by the district or a contractor, as eligible use for the Common School Construction Fund. So instead of tapping ELF, it would tap the Common. And then on top of that, it authorizes the transfer and appropriation of funds from the Common School Construction to the ELF for the purposes of funding those specific projects. Again, and that's for preschool and before and after school programs. The next bill, did I drop that in the chat? I better double check. Nope, I didn't. Copy the link. And then the next one, this one is it's really just a technical fix, is House Bill 2111. It makes no changes to working connections, childcare eligibility or requirements. It really just reorganizes specific statutes and then repeals two, both of which are no longer relevant. One being the unemployment compensation related to additional temporary benefits increases, I believe related to COVID. And then it repeals a 2011 report and assessment that's been done and completed. The last one on this list is related to contracted slots for home visiting and children receiving protective services. So it's definitely child welfare related, but I think really relevant here in this space. So, and I need to drop that bill on the link. You also have the wrong title in front of you. It's actually engrossed second substitute Senate Bill 6109. Say that 5 times fast. This bill provides support for children affected by high potency synthetic opioids. It adds a new section to RCW 43.216, our underlining statute for working connections. For establishing a pilot program for contracted childcare slots for infants in protective services, children in protective, infants in child protective services. Additionally, a new section is added, creating a targeted contracted slots awarded via competitive process with existing home visiting programs, and includes targeted slots for families experiencing high potency synthetic opioid related substance disorders. This bill does also provide a list of priority services, and they're really just centered around open cases. I think the highest priority being for children in protective services, families with open assessment responses, and then families with volunteer services open. I'm going to pause there to see if there are any questions before we move on.
Jared, do you want to go?
Excuse me, you can put again the last one link.
Yeah, of course. You do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is just more of, I guess, like a comment to the group around the SHB 2195. The first thing I wanted to say was, Melissa, thank you so much. Like, I'm not a policy wonk and not fully aware of like all the machinations of how these laws get moved around. So thank you so much for helping explain it. Just kind of putting on the radar of the group of maybe an unfounded worry, but this kind of encroachment of the school districts into preschool and before and after care around their ability to be eligible for some of these programs that were designed maybe for, you know, preschools and organizations that have existed a long time outside of the school district. So just kind of keeping that on the radar of, you know, making it so we're aware of these things that we don't end up even more directly in competition for funds, space, etc., with the school districts.
For that. I think that's why I wanted to make a very clear point about like how that, because at first, when I first read that change in the funding, it seemed disproportionate, but then as I really fully got down into the weeds, it really is just, yeah, it's more to come hopefully on that. So next slide, please. And is it possible for me to share my screen?
I think that should work. Jessica, does she need to have any settings changed for that?
Nope, go ahead. Oh, cool. I see it. Okay, make sure. I have like a bazillion screens open, so I just need to make sure it's the right one.
Melissa, can I just share one point about that ELF thing also?
Absolutely.
You know, given that we know the capital gains funds goes into the ELTA account and anything over 500 million can go into capital funds for schools, it seems like it just doesn't need to be in that bill that public schools can access those funds. So I just wanted to make that point that it's like the additional competition for funds within the only bit that might be helpful to childcare feels really disingenuous and puts us in a yet further risky position.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sorry. I'm trying to pay. Okay. Did everyone see the screen? I'm sorry. I keep messing it up. Okay. Let me try it one more time. I'm trying to listen. I apparently am not good at doing two things at once. Is everybody seeing the screen? Should be the Washington State Legislative.
Yes.
Yeah, at first, you know, I want to talk, Susan, you know, at first I thought the same thing. I guess when I first read the bill, it seemed like the intention was to provide more funding for early learning facilities. And I guess this way, I wasn't part of any of the conversations, but it seems like there's some need to, like the school districts have some need or some interest in wanting to make sure that the funding is bifurcated and accounted for separately. So it is what it is. I mean, it's not one of my favorite bills. But I think for us, one of the things that I have concerns about and that I know program staff I've talked to about and that we're, you know, trying to strategize is how do we make sure that the intention around these fundings actually leads to more capacity around ECAP slots and working connections childcare slots. Okay, so I want to just take a few moments, probably about 5, 10. I try to time myself. It varies. It just depends on where I get stuck. So I want to go through some of these resources, really give you tools to get involved, get your voices heard. DCYF can't advocate like the way that you all can. Even saying things like I support this bill is not necessarily something DCYF should be doing. What we should be doing is really focusing cognitively on the programs it impacts. You know, one of the things that I've talked about in another presentation is it equity and anti-racist focused, you know, and are we preserving, are we improving? And I think those are some of our guiding principles when we're wanting to make edits, but for the most part, when we're making recommendations, it's really technical in nature. Like if you do this RCW goes into effect right now, it runs afoul against this RCW. Or if you were to make this effective date right now, essentially we wouldn't be able to comply because of XYZ that has to happen in the background. So I just want to give some flavor on like what I'm proposing up when we're asking for edits, like going back to 6038. So the underlining law itself included, I guess it provides tax exemptions for childcare providers that were caring for children 7 years and younger. And considering that they also included the authority to, the bill included our authority to assess licensing fees, but are removing that authority, right? So then why wouldn't we want to also have a say on it? I mean, like, not that we don't, I'm sorry, I'm like talking in circles. My point being is like, they kind of opened this wedge. Normally we wouldn't be advising on a B&O tax exemption, but for the fact that they've kind of opened this wedge for us to say, okay, well, we definitely see you editing our statute, but on top of that, we see that you're wanting to make this exemption. Well, what would be most beneficial is if that matched what we considered eligibility. And that's why you see 12 or 13 and under or 19 and under with documented disability or court supervised.
Hey, Melissa, I know you're
I'm sorry, I know that
to go, but we are running just a tad bit late, so I don't know if you could wrap it up possibly. This is all good stuff, and I know you're passionate about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely. I just want a couple of things. Thank you for the time check. I appreciate it. I will go on and on and on. So anyway, I just wanted to like run really quickly through like a bill summary page. I think is really helpful. So one of the bills I have open is the concerning common interest. It's a really great example. It's also one we've been tracking. Just real quickly, you have your bill number and your bill title, your sponsors. The first name is often the primary sponsor, and usually the person that during those hearings is giving an overview of the bill. You'll also see if it's being proposed by an agency, and if it has a companion, you'll see that immediately. If a bill, no matter what, whether a bill is being heard or anything, you can comment at any time. Anytime. You can also use this to verify who your district is. I'm of course just using my office. That's not my address. And particularly with this bill, we know this bill is in the House. And so you might want to just contact your representatives. You could contact them all. Would you like a response? You can say yes or no, your contact information that's required, and stuff that you would, other additional information if you want to have them call you, if they do, whether you support, oppose, or are neutral. And then of course you have an opportunity to make comments here. The other thing is the only time that you'll see this option here is when a bill is actually going to be being heard at a hearing. And so you can literally either do a manual register. So there's instructions here on how to register. And then also once you're all set up and ready to go, I think with a profile, you can just like literally select which bill you want to testify and then pick if you want to do it in person or remotely. If you're going to do a panel, you might want to have that set up ahead of time. You'll need to, and then you can go ahead and just fill out this information. It's just really easy, really quick, and right at the tip of your fingers. Just real quickly, this is at a glance. You can see right away the bill version. You can see that it's currently in a hearing, Human Services. It's probably why they have the testimony up, where it's at. So it's gone through its house of origin, its first house, and now is in the second house or opposite house. This is a detailed layout. And the reason why I want to point this out, this more detailed layout, because it literally tells you, well, one, it provides a lot of really great information, like if there's an executive action, which committee heard it, materials that you can read. If there was an amendment that was adopted, you'll also see like a substitute. I think also what's really important here is there's some terminology that as, you know, naturally part of this process. And in the slide that I'm providing, and I'm going to drop in this chat for all of you, is an overview of that process. And it talks about like the first reading, the introduction, what the second one means, rules, third reading, which is basically the vote to get it, you know, from the floor and get it out of the House, right? Or get it out of the Senate. So it's a lot of really great information that I want to make sure you all have. The other thing I wanted to show you was that they also have tutorials available online. I think these are some really quick links, and these are the same videos, but if you were to come down here for like understanding the ledge process, there's a handout that you can read as well as the video, navigating the legislative site, this site itself, as well as other resources. And then the other thing I wanted to
really quickly, we're running just a little about 10 minutes late, Melissa, so I don't want to cut you off, but we have one more presenter.
Okay, well, I mean, like I can be done there. I didn't really get, it's fine.
I know, I don't think we allotted as much time as we should have for your section today.
Well, I didn't get 30 minutes for sure, but that's okay. I'm here to serve all of you. I'm here to present information. I'm very thankful that you all invited me into this space. And I will see you all pretty soon with mid-legislative update with the budgets too. So more to come on these.
Thank you so much, Melissa. We absolutely appreciate it. It helps us understand it better. All right, Julie, are you ready?
Yep, don't forget to take the survey, guys, about the last topic. It's in the chat. Jessica just put it in there. We're going to be having information presented about the Access and Living Wage Proviso, DCYF's Assistant Secretary of Early Learning, Nicole Rose, and Early Care and Education Access Project Manager, Diana Stokes, will be providing an update and gathering feedback. So thank you both for being here, and let's jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Julie and team, and thanks everybody for hanging in there for some lively discussion today. I know we've covered lots of great things. I'm happy to be with you all. What I want to say is that this isn't the first opportunity to have this conversation. It won't be the last opportunity to have this conversation. And one of the things I think, you know, we've really heard from you before is making sure we build on a lot of the feedback that we have received in the past as we continue to think about our access and living wage implementation plan. But wanted to ground us a little bit in some of the things that are foundational as we think about this work. And one is the DCYF vision for early learning, and really thinking about our integrated mixed delivery system and making sure that we've got affordable, high quality care for all of Washington's children. And that as we're thinking about that, we're focused on child outcomes, school readiness, and family well-being. And of course, really thinking about that regardless of race or income. And so when we go deeper into what those strategic outcomes really look like, one is that we're really focused on 80% of Washington children being ready for kindergarten, and that means all of Washington's children. And again, that real focus on high quality early learning available and affordable to all. And so we have a unique opportunity to really think about how we can do that. So if we go to the next slide. One of the things that is really foundational to this work is the cost of quality care model. And I referenced this a little bit earlier today when I talked about the early educator design team, but this is our opportunity to move away from the market rate survey and provide some recommendations about what it takes to provide reimbursement rates at the true cost of quality care. And there are a couple of things that go into that model that the early educator design team worked on. Non-personnel costs are what we would consider some fixed costs in the model that are updated with the cost survey. But the personnel costs and quality enhancements or quality variables are the things that the early educator design team weighed in on as they were meeting. And I want to share a little bit about what are in those
next buckets because I think they're important as we think about the cost of quality care. And the reason we're talking about this is, again, that rate we believe is really foundational to getting to the access and living wage work. So if we can go to the next slide. I also want to recognize I may be going kind of fast, but I want to make sure that we have some time to get some input from you all today as well. So there were 8 primary variables that were looked at in this design team. And those included, on the left-hand side, personnel costs such as salaries, benefits, retirement, and paid leave. And the early educator design team is making some recommendations as it relates to looking at the MIT living wage, looking at, a significant amount of paid leave days, and knowing that those things are really important when we're thinking about what it costs to operate and run your high quality business and to provide the care to kids and families who are coming to you. These really built off of some of the recommendations that were in the Child Care Collaborative Task Force that really said, here are some things that we need to look at in cost of care. And this was part of the Fair Start for Kids Act that is asking us to look at these things as well. On the right-hand side, you see some items that are maybe considered quality enhancements or things that staff are really doing and directors and owners are really doing as they think about supporting their teachers in planning, making sure that they have the curriculum needed in the classroom, as well as professional development supports. And that family engagement may be something that looks like a child parent conference or some of those pieces. And so the design team made some recommendations in each of these areas, which then will roll up into the cost of care. As we will submit part of that or submit a decision package for the 25-27 legislative session for this work, I want to also talk about some of the things that we will be submitting in the next legislative session, which I know is a little odd considering we're still in this legislative session, but we want to be really mindful about the things that are coming as we move into 25-27. So if we want to go to the next slide. These are what are in law right now related to Fair Start for Kids Act. And so you see on the left-hand corner, the child care subsidy rates, and that we need to make recommendations about the cost model and adjust the rates for regions and look at different regions. And so that is what will move forward. And then on the right-hand side, what you see are some eligibility criteria that are being expanded in working connections. So we're at 60% of state median income right now, and beginning July 1, 2025, we need to submit a decision package so that families go to 75% of the state median income. And then in 27, there's another increase there as well. What you don't see on here is ECAP entitlement, but in the 25-27 biennium, that's another piece that we'll be looking at as we submit decision packages. So as we move to the next slide, we are really looking at how the cost of quality care rate model, working connections eligibility expansion, and ECAP entitlement, plus the work that we're doing on access and living wage really adds up to our integrated mixed delivery system. But that cost of quality care rate model, working connections, eligibility expansion, and ECAP entitlement are really foundational to us making steps to what is on the following slide, which is making sure that families are paying no more than 7% of their income for access to early care and education, and that providers are paid living wages. So part of what we're really trying to take a look at with this is what are some of the things that are already in law that can help us get to families paying no more than 7% and can help us get to the place where providers are paid living wages. I'm going to turn this over to Diana Stokes to talk a little bit about the work that is happening related to this very specific proviso as she is managing this. So Diana?
Thanks, Nicole, and thank you everyone for having me with you all this afternoon. My name is Diana Stokes, if you are not familiar with me, and I am the Early Care and Education Access Project Manager. On this slide is the proviso language regarding this access and living wage proviso. A couple things I want to call out in addition to what Nicole has already shared is that our big deliverable for this proviso is submitting a implementation plan by June 30th of 2025, so next year, that will really speak to how we're going to be able to support families with paying no more than 7%, but also with supporting providers with receiving living wages and benefits. And I know this has come up in several of the conversations throughout today of how we need to support providers so that they have a desire to stay, right? We miss that. And so this is going to be just one of those ways that we can support them. And then as Nicole mentioned earlier too, there was an early care and an early educator design team that has been working and providing recommendations related to that cost of care model. And so that's really going to support this work going forward as well. Next slide, please. And this kind of summarizes the work that we're doing. So as Nicole mentioned, we are working towards having an integrated mixed delivery system of affordable, high quality early care and education for all of Washington's children, and providers are provided a living wage and benefits. And then as Nicole mentioned, we are building on existing foundations to strengthen this integrated mixed delivery system. But also we want to make sure we're focusing on parent choice and that they have options available to them. And we're also working on focusing on child outcomes, school readiness, family and provider well-being, and self-sufficiency. And we really look at increasing access and having a living wage for our providers, really the pillars of moving this work forward. Next slide, please. So there has been a lot of work that has happened over the last several years. So Nicole kicked us off with the Fair Start for Kids Act that passed back in 2021, which seems like so long ago with everything that's happened since then. And that really helped move momentum in this work. From there, we had the Child Care Collaborative Task Force cost model that was completed back in November of 2022. And then starting in 2022, that early educator design team came together to talk about the rate model development and the things that should be included, which were those different pillars that Nicole mentioned. Officially in July of 2023, we began the work on this early care and education access and living wage proviso. Last fall, the Office of Child Care approved rate models as having an alternative methodology. And so we're working on that too. Recently, as last month, we kicked off the year with a cost of quality care survey that will also support meeting federal timelines for the 2024 CCDF plan. You may have seen that, and I know Julie mentioned that earlier from your notes from the last meeting. This work will really help inform the implementation plan that we're doing in relation to this proviso. This spring, just so that you're all aware, if you're not already, bargaining will begin with SEIU 925, and we want to make sure that the work that we're doing with the proviso doesn't contradict anything that we're doing during bargaining. Later this fall, we are going to be submitting a progress update and having that ready, as the final implementation plan is not due until after the legislative session next year. So we're going to be providing a progress update that will talk about what we've learned so far and where we are going. And then in addition to this final timeline, we also have our decision packages that have been talked about by Melissa and Nicole that will help inform the new rates and budget for the next 2 years. Next slide, please. So there is a lot of work that's happening, and we want to make sure that we are engaging individuals. Just like Nicole said, this is not the last time you will hear from us. And so there's really two different components that are happening related to this work. So DCYF has the Access and Living Wage implementation plan that we're working on, but in parallel to that, Child Care Aware of Washington also has an advocacy plan. So in the yellow gold color, you'll see what is happening related to the advocacy campaign. So informing that side of the work was the early educator design team and the work that they've done. And then they also have convened a partner roundtable group of about 10 organizations that will provide feedback through listening sessions and or surveys within their communities that will help inform some policy questions. On the other side of the Access and Living Wage implementation plan, we are collaborating with Child Care Aware of Washington and SEIU 925 to help inform this, and we meet regularly to plan this work moving forward. And we're also doing some additional engagement too with our own DCYF staff, because many of them are also parents or have been providers or are currently providers. We've met with IPEL and are working with our tribal partners. We are working with Washington Communities for Children, which I'll share on the next slide. But we're also engaged with ELAC. We hope to continue to be engaged with you all here at the Provider Supports, and also be working with parent advisory groups. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're working with Washington Communities for Children, and they're leading some engagement for us within their communities. So they will be conducting listening sessions as well as surveys, and this will be conducted with providers and family members across Washington State within their network regions. The goal is to have group sizes of 5 to 10 people per session, and they're going to be going through some designated policy questions. So in the listening sessions, we really want individuals to have the opportunity to fully engage. So they'll have about 4 to 5 questions on different categories that they'll be responding to, versus the surveys, they'll have access to all the questions that they'll be responding. And then our engagement goal is that we hope to have 3 provider listening sessions per region. And then with that, having at least 5 participants. So that would ensure that we're reaching out to at least 150 providers. And again, these are the listening sessions. So they're conducted virtually or in person. And then additionally, having 3 family listening sessions with each region with 5 participants for each session. So that's going to be an additional 150 parents and families involved. On the other side of it, we're going to be having surveys sent out. And our goal is to have at least 250 family members and 250 provider respondents that we can pull from. And then these surveys and listening sessions will help inform the policy questions that we have related to the Access and Living Wage and informing the implementation plan. Some other work that Washington Communities for Children did prior to kicking off these listening sessions and surveys is that they actually conducted like a landscape analysis of where have we already been communicating with people, and who are we missing in our audiences that are not being represented. And this helped to inform the prioritization of the populations for these listening sessions and the survey distributions. So that way we are well represented by our communities. And it also helped to validate information that we have obtained in past listening sessions and surveys to ensure that what we're obtaining now aligns with it. So they were able to identify areas of supporting families regarding access to early care and education, such as availability and affordability of programs. And additionally, they were able to identify areas of growth to support providers and the workforce, such as wages and staff retention. Next slide, please. So there's a lot that's happening on this, and I'll kind of take a moment to walk us through. But what we're trying to accomplish is really developing a model that is going to serve us getting to an increased access and living wage. So this really starts with our cost of care survey that I mentioned that was put out last month. It remains open until the end of this month, and then we'll be pulling that data to help inform that. We are partnered with Western Washington University, where they'll be conducting a literature review. And with that, they're going to be looking at the economic effects of subsidized childcare. And Childcare Aware, as I mentioned, we're working with them. They're also partnered with ECO Northwest on model development on their end. And so through this process, they're going to be gathering information. We're looking at what other states have been doing. Particular states that we've been looking at have been New Mexico, I'm going to forget one, and then also DC. But we've been looking at 3 other entities and the work that they've done and what have they learned from that and how we can grow from there. Through this, they're really going to look at, okay, so if we have subsidy, what are the varying levels and how does that look like? How much funds does that request? They're going to be looking at what the cost of care survey results look like. So in the questions, if you haven't seen it already, we ask questions like, how much do you pay your staff? How much staff do you have? What would you like to be able to support them with benefits if you aren't already? How much do you charge per child and for the different age groups? And that's really going to help us build this bigger picture of, as we look to increase access, what do we also need for the workforce and to ensure that we have the staff that we need to support more children in care. This will fit into modeling that happens. And we'll also look at having a feasibility study. So what's needed to have this for statewide implementation? And this will tie into the findings report that will come from the literature review, the surveys, and the analysis that's happening. And all of this will feed into our status update that will come out in fall of 2024. Again, that's just going to be a little bit of a preview that will help us going into the legislative session. And then that will build us into the final implementation plan that will come out in June of next year. Next slide, please. So in the end, what we're really trying to do is that if we are expanding community access to affordable, high quality early care and education, and we continue to improve quality in these settings for children, then all children ought to arrive in kindergarten ready to learn and have the quality care they need as they transition to K-12 learning, and providers will have the resources to provide quality early learning and education that meets the needs of children and family. And I'm going to pause there for a moment because I know there are some questions that have come up in the chat. Our next slide is questions before we go into breakout groups. So this is a great opportunity for us to pause right here. Just lost my chat.
Thanks, Diana. There's a couple of great questions in here around kind of what is the mechanism to get wages and benefits to providers, and that is something certainly we're exploring and need to understand what's the best mechanism to do that. I see the comment here about you know, what do subsidy rates mean in regards to that? And I think one of the realities is that sometimes you may have a few families on subsidy and some families are not, right? So then what does that mean in your center or licensed family home as you think about raising wages for all? I think there are other just some questions around labor and some of those pieces. And so it's great to have 925 as a partner in some of this as they're thinking through some of the implications there as well. So if you have thoughts about that, you know, please feel free to continue to drop them in the chat. That's helpful for us to think about. And then Jamie, I also see the question around, you know, have other states done something like this and was it successful? And you know, one of the things I was thinking about is that this really, I think, is a place where Washington is an innovator again and a leader as we really think about what had been proposed in Build Back Better, which was really, several years ago, which was really trying to get to that 7% families paying no more than 7% of their income. I think sometimes what we've seen is that sometimes you see municipalities, so maybe some cities or counties who are attempting to do things like this in other places. Sometimes there's a real focus on kind of universal access to preschool. And, how are you getting all 3s and 4s in? But that's part of why we're also going back and looking at and doing some literature reviews to see as states have moved also to a cost of quality model instead of market rate survey, what have they seen as far as subsidy uptake? So I would say short answer is there may be pockets where that's happened, and we're trying to do some literature review to find out what that looks like. I think the other piece of this is it's not just about rates for providers or wages. It's about facilities and families, and do we have providers in the places where families are wanting to go to care? How close is that to their work? Do they want it close to their home? So it's really trying to put, quite honestly, all of these puzzle pieces together as we look at this work.
Yeah, and just to add to that was a great summary, Nicole. Thank you. When I talk about the policy questions, Nicole just kind of highlighted them. So we have 4 different categories that we and Child Care Aware are looking into when it comes to our engagement. And those are access and affordability for families, compensation and professional development for providers, facilities, and then integration of systems and classrooms. And so we're trying to look at that whole picture. So I love the questions that are coming because they're definitely questions that we have. And as Nicole opened, if you have thoughts, please share that. But that kind of kicks us off into the next little bit. We have some time yet. We would like to open this up for breakout groups. We have 2 policy questions right here that we would love for you to discuss. We recognize that we are short on time. So as a group, do not feel like you have to commit to responding to both questions. If you can, great. But if not, we really want to leave enough time to really dive in deeply to one question. In the chat, Jessica just provided a link that you can use to capture the notes that your group has. So the 2 questions that we have is, if there were to be a family income bracket where families pay no or reduced copays, what would that look like? What's that income threshold for that? And should we consider over income populations to be included in these bracket if they fall into another category? And then the second question is, we assume that all programs will participate in early achievers, just like they do right now with our subsidy program. What support will be needed for this and resources for DCYF to provide increased support related to this? So with that, I'm going to pause and turn it over to either a host or whoever has the capacity to send us into breakout groups.
So if we're all back, then Nicole, did you want to have a group discussion for a few minutes? I know we're wrapping up, hoping to wrap up by 1:30.
Yeah, I appreciate the ask, Julie, and I want to be really respectful of folks' time. And one of the wonders that I had, I see some of the comments in here, is if this group would be interested in us pulling together a special session where we pull together a broader group of questions and there's more time to actually go through them and dive into some deeper policy questions instead of just having an hour. And we'd be happy, or 15 minutes, excuse me, to do that, where we can just focus in on some of those questions. So I just want to put that out there as an option.
Yeah, I think that, and if folks have questions that they think should be asked of this group, it'd be really helpful to have those chat. Be useful, I don't know.
Yeah, and if you want to, if there are questions you're thinking of, I think it would be great. And maybe Aaron and team, we can have them send those through to community engagement for now, and then we can compile those with some of the other questions that were in our bucket. So we would love the opportunity to do that with you all.
Yeah, we can include an ask about that in the follow-up to get input on the questions, but yeah, we can definitely make that happen.
Thank you. And we'll also keep the link open. We typically have kept the link open for you all a little bit after the meetings. And so if you want us to do that, we can keep it open through the middle of next week if that works, and pull that in. And then we can work with Aaron and team to connect with you all about when we can do kind of a special session related to this.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the earlier question that we chatted a little bit in the chat was just about how this is going to be distributed, how it's going to, I mean, I think there's some questions around that that could be kind of a brainstorming session within this group.
And we would appreciate that. I think part of what we would really love to hear is from sort of a variety of perspectives too, right? As an owner and a director, as an individual person that the funds would be going to, because we know there's a lot to consider there.
And I just question for Diana, you said that you guys were looking at other states, you know, how they were doing it, and like New Mexico. Do you have a sample of like what they're doing for like us to look at, like just so we can see what, you know, you guys are kind of getting a broad, you know, idea of how to bring that money in, or how to, you know, compensate the providers, and, you know, or do we have a link to them just so we could check it out?
Yeah, so Western Washington is the one pulling resources together for our literature review. So we don't have that yet. We've had discussions about what they're finding, but we won't have our report, I think, until I believe it's end of April, beginning of May timeframe. And then I don't know if they found the mechanisms of how they've been able to implement things, but I know they're looking at what are the avenues that they're looking for. But once I have that final report of their findings, I'll definitely know more as to what those states and DC have been doing related to, you know, similar work.
Yeah.
So more to come, I would say, Katie.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, just, I mean, there's so many states and probably so many different mechanisms, and just like they all do their own background check mechanisms and such, you know, it would just be nice to be able to see who and what they're doing.
Yeah, it'd be great to not have to recreate the wheel for sure.
Exactly. Exactly. Great. Julie, is that it for them?
Any last thoughts there, Nicole?
Appreciate the time and the dialogue. I'm looking forward to having some more conversation with you all.
Anything else from you, Diana? Okay.
Just repeat what Nicole said. Thank you all.
Okay. Okay, well then I guess we are moving on. Katie? Thanks for being here, guys.
Oh my gosh, today was quite the session with so many DCYF participants and quite a few providers today. So I know Julie and I are really excited to see the numbers for providers, because this is for us as providers across the state. So again, you know, pass it along to other providers that you know, or if you have groups in your local regions. We would love to just keep improving the participation on the provider side, because everybody's their ideas and their, you know, their experiences really do make a difference in what we are doing and what DCYF is doing. So please, please, please fill out the survey as well, the reflection survey. We do go through that as a provider support team, and we go through what you guys put in, and it helps us for the next meeting. So, and that next meeting in 2 months will be April 17th, 2024. So thank you guys. Happy Valentine's Day. If you have kids, I'm sure you guys are going to be having a long night, as myself. So have a wonderful day. Enjoy the sunshine today.
Don't forget to do the survey. It's in the chat. Thanks, everyone.